Hey guys, what is going on? And welcome to another episode of Kagurabachi Chapter Review. Yes, Kagurabachi Chapter Review. I have hopped on the bandwagon. I gave a nice little read through of the new arc, and I won't lie, definitely an improvement upon the Sojo arc. Not that the Sojo arc was too bad, but long story short, I'm bought in now. The last arc was great. It really focused so much on how much power the enchanted blades have. The Sazanami clan was a very interesting dynamic, and it gets me excited to see how some of these other portions of the world of Kagurabachi are going to go. But the most important thing that we learned from the last arc is we got introduced to the supposed Hishaku leader, which, to be honest with you, I'm calling cap. They seem like a secret organization. I don't think the leader would be so willing to show himself that quickly. Maybe this is a guy who's pretending to be the leader, or he's like the second in command. He's not the actual full-blooded originator of the Hishaku group. I could be wrong, but again, I think it's important to realize that a group like this of sorcerers and trickery, we can't take anything that they say for face value whatsoever. Long story short, now that the Shinichi is in the kamunabi's hands, it's pretty clear that this is exactly what the Hishaku wanted. The enchanted blade wielder is a part of the Hishaku or on their side, or maybe they have a way to manipulate the enchanted blade wielder, or once the Shinichi and the enchanted blade wielder make contact, they can attack the kamunabi. Alls I know is, it seems like the very new protagonist squad that we're going to be working with for this brand new arc that we're going into is Hikori, Hiyuki, Tafuku, Shiba, the goat, and Chihiro, the brand new protagonist group. And honestly, the most integral person in this group is Hikori. And I just want to yap a little bit about how much of a great character Hikori is. Honestly, one of my major things with this story is how much Chihiro just does so much. And I think we need to start delegating some of these tasks to other people. Every time Shiba does something, I don't see it, and it makes me very upset because Shiba's such a cool character. But Hikori is that first protagonist character besides Hiyuki, anti-hero kind of, that is able to show us their skills with sorcery and be utterly so important to the fight. Hiyuki is, of course, on the same level as Chihiro and fighting in that last fight, but Hikori is the newest addition, and I absolutely love him. The fact that he was able to transport Chihiro to Enton into the storage warehouse in the last arc, and that coming back to being the way that they can actually acquire every single enchanted blade just by meeting up with all of the different wielders and just connecting and registering their sorcerer energy, that's going to allow them to take all of the enchanted blades back from the Hishaku, which honestly is an amazing plan. I can't even hold them for that. We get this awesome page of the 4 remaining enchanted blade wielders, and we also find out that each of them were picked individually by Chihiro's father in order to make sure that they could wield their, enchanted blade the best possible. So I'm really curious to see the difference between a person like Sojo, who absolutely corrupted and turned Rokuhira's philosophy of sword making into slaughter and massacre. I'm interested to see what people actually chosen by Chihiro's father are going to look like, what their philosophies will be. Are they all going to be different? Are they all going to be similar personalities? They were all a part of the war that went on years ago, which that's something I also need to find out more about, because you can see the difference between people that are newer in the kamunabi and people that are older in the kamunabi, like that one guy who knew all about the Shinichi last arc. His composure compared to her, the newer kamunabi agent, was night and day. So I'm interested to see how the war has affected these people. But we're gonna have to wait on that for right now, because Chihiro has to gain the trust of the kamunabi and actually join it. So because he's an enchanted blade wielder, he's been kind of hiding from the government for all this time. They apparently have to put him on trial. And the thing is Chihiro always has a plan, right? The one thing that has been completely concrete throughout this entire 45 chapter story is that Chihiro never goes into something without a plan. And look at that face in that final panel looks like someone who is not ready to let the kamunabi just take advantage of them for everything they've got. So I'm excited to see how Chihiro plans to finesse the government in this next chapter, and I'm interested to see how the story goes. Are we going to go from place to place to place of all these sacred hideouts that are keeping the enchanted blade wielders? Are one of these hideouts going to be attacked by the Hoshaku and will introduce to more members? We're going to be going over chapter 46, which is entitled Unruly Punk, which just makes a lot of sense based off the way Chihiro finagles the government in this chapter. But without wasting any time, hit that like button if you enjoy this content and subscribe so you don't miss a single update every week on this story. Kagurabachi 46 kicks off from the court trial that began with the kamunabi last chapter. Chihiro, realizing that he's going to be able to learn way more about the enchanted blades than he ever will inside the world government than outside of it, decides that with Hayuki now allied, he's going to take this opportunity to join the kamunabi, go about this plan of collecting all of the enchanted blades with Hikori's storage ability. Now, of course, everyone in this court trial is present in our group except for Shiba, who we know is ex-Kamunabi, originally way back during the war and when Rokuhira was at first, distributing the enchanted blades. And unfortunately, after Rokuhira's death and the way that the Kamunabi kind of just brushed that aside and badmouthed Rokuhira, Shiba kind of made some enemies and also just got into a lot of trouble on his way out. It was not the easiest work resignation, let's just say that. Shiba decides it's better for him to just not be present because he would just cause more trouble. Now, the Kamunabi are again holding this trial for one, to even see if Chihiro is Rokuhira's son in the first place, since they just don't believe that at all, and two, Chihiro's plan to disrupt the Hoshaku with Hikaru's storage house ability. Now, again, last chapter we mentioned how the four wielders are hidden in high security sites for the Kamunabi, and we get this reiterated again, getting reassured that all of these elite sorcerers in these hideouts are as strong as, if not stronger than, an enchanted blade. So honestly, we shouldn't have anything to worry about because of how elite these soldiers are. And if we've learned anything throughout the 46 chapters of Kagurabachi, it's that elite faceless sorcerers are handled in this series, how should I say? Let's just say we should be very worried about all four of these hideouts. Back to the court trial, half the council doesn't even care about this or even want to be here. They barely believe Chihiro is even flesh and blood Rokuhira as it is. But now that the Shinichi is involved, they really don't have much of a choice, and they can either try and get Enten under their control now and ruin the Hoshaku's plans in one fell swoop, or just continue to twiddle their thumbs like the average world government. Hikaru is the one integral to this plan. He's present and they ask for a demonstration. Unfortunately, because he just awakened to his power, he is basically crippled. He's exhausted and unable to call it out again until he gets adequate rest. And now, sure, in this instance, for the court trial, that's fine. As we'll see, this may be a problem leading into the arc we're about to go into, but more on that later. Some of the Kamunabi higher-ups are willing to throw Chihiro a bone and give him the benefit of the doubt and say, hey, you know what? Bad blood, all that stuff. Where's Cloud Gouger? How about we, get on the right foot and start with that? And of course, as we know, it is broken and destroyed. And Chihiro reiterates this, and they are like, wow, bro, you're cooked. We have nothing to even trust you on. This whole entire meeting is pointless. Everyone is kind of just being like, why are we doing this? This is just dumb. We don't need you whatsoever. How are we even supposed to believe your plan? Your guy can't even perform for us. Chihiro cuts through all of that bullshit though, and in my opinion, one of the most goated MC moments in a while that we've seen. He just spits through all of that and says, you know what? Fuck my Rokuhira name. Bloodline, flesh, who cares about any of that? Judge me on what I've done. I killed Sojo for you. I stopped the Raikuzachi, which hasn't happened in decades, honestly ever in its existence, and I also retrieved the Shinichi for you. What more do you need from me to trust me? Which, again, that's real right there. That's a man who said, fuck all this politics, all this bureaucracy, and all your different opinions. Judge me on my face value. Judge me on what you've seen me do already. What have I given you to not trust me? Hiyuki, who we know is one of the strongest members or soldiers that the Kamunabi has, continually vouches for Chihiro throughout this entire trial, which goes a long way with a lot of the higher ups, honestly, basically claiming that Chihiro is nothing but good-natured. He'll only harm evildoers. Not all of the higher ups are willing to, submit to this. One of them specifically wraps his arm around Chihiro and goes, you know what? You are Rokuhiro's son. You want to know why I know that? Because you're an arrogant prick. You're an unruly punk, and you go in hot-headed and you have no plans. He basically announces to the entire Kamunabi and says, without saying it, we've already dealt with the Rokuhiros before. Fuck this guy. Let's kill him, steal Enten, and basically just give it to a wielder that we know we can control. And honestly, if this did not happen the way that it did, that might be the end of Kagurabachi as we know, because I don't think anyone was about to stop this man. Suddenly, an announcement rings out for something that I could have told you from a mile away. One of the 4 blade wielders hideouts has just been ambushed and attacked by the Hashaku. The Hashaku surprisingly had sorcerers wielding enchanted blade-like powers. Now, to the Kamunabi, they're all like, what the hell do you mean? Whereas with us, we've already pieced everything together. Why did they give their only, non-wielded enchanted blade, Cloud Gouger, to some low-level weirdo like Sojo? Because they have the Datenseki crystals, and they've perfected it to the point where they can literally, at their beck and call, give low-level sorcerers insane power buffs of spiritual energy on the likes of an enchanted blade wielder. We've already seen this last arc with Tenri Sazanami basically burning his entire body out to try and fight, and pretty successfully on par with Chihiro wielding Enten and Cloud Gouger. Again, the entire hideout is destroyed. We could have expected that. And even reports of a tattoo-bearing member of the Hashaku were present at this hideout. So it's only a matter of time, for one, until all of these hideouts are invaded. So we should probably act pretty quickly, which is exactly what Chihiro says to them and goes, well, I'm your best bet you got right now, guys. And to be fair, despite some of the members of the Kamunabi still wanting to go through with it, kill Chihiro and just get someone that they can better control and trust, Chihiro even admits now he's not going to give the enchanted blades to the Kamunabi. If he gets a hold of them, he will remain an enemy to them no matter what. The head of the Kamunabi admits they really don't have a choice right now. They don't have time to get a new blade wielder for Enten, train them up to be on the same level of power as someone like Chihiro that again stopped the Rakuzachi and fought against the Shinuchi. They say, you know what? Screw it. The attacked blade wielder is still alive and is running away. They need assistance. Chihiro, desperate times call for desperate measures. We will not ally with you, and we will definitely not let you have all the enchanted blades when this is all through, but we accept your proposal. Go out. Here's your first mission. Save this enchanted blade wielder, which is basically going to send us on our next arc, guys. I'm very excited to see, one, how a more powered up Chihiro and our group are going to handle more of these spirit energy buffed Datenseki crystal wearing sorcerers. And two, I'm also interested to see if we'll actually have a genuine fight with one of the lower brow Hashaku members. Obviously, we met the quote unquote leader. I still am a little wary if he's the real leader or just the second in command, the face of the organization, not the shadow leader. We've seen multiple people be present for Rokuhiro's death, and apparently the leader wasn't even there. So I would love to see a Hashaku member that we get to know in this arc. I'm interested to get to know the other enchanted blade wielders, and I'm only to assume that more and more of these hideouts are going to get crushed. By the end of this arc, we may have all of the enchanted blades, or at least most of them, in the hands of either the Hashaku or the Kamunabi to create the all-out war at the end of this. Chapter 47, Uruha, is the start of the Sword Bearer Assassination arc, which, if it's anything like the rising tension of the Sojo to the Rakuzachi to now, I'm excited to see what Kagurabachi has in store for us. Because, honestly, now knowing that the 4 enchanted wielders are at stake, there's a pretty big potential we may be running into a very divisive, very insanely jam-packed action arc. Today, we focus on the enchanted blade wielder, Yoji Uruha, the original owner of the blade Kumeyori. He was specifically chosen by Rokuhiro during the Seitei War, and Uruha admitted that Working for Rokuhira was literally the highest point of his life. That was the most proud he was able to feel about himself because he was fighting for what he felt was right. He saw the fire burning behind Rokuhira's eyes, something that we've heard multiple people that have met him on the side say as well. So it inspired Iruha to live his best life, and he actually voluntarily relinquished his blade at the end of the war. He felt no reason to it. He was happy that he spent that time, and he moved on with his life. For 15 years, Iruha didn't hear anything from this person that made such a difference in him, something that was basically an idol. Somewhat, honestly, kind of similar to Sojo, right? He gets the news that the Hashaku have killed Rokuhira. This puts Iruha in a depression. He is so upset that his idol, he hasn't even spoke to them in so long, and they're just gone, destroyed by this criminal organization, the Hashaku. And now you're saying that Iruha can't even live his normal life. He has to go away in the witness protection program and hide and basically live his life in seclusion for the rest of his life now because of what? This terrible organization? Despite his sadness over the entire thing, he is, basically forced to go out in hiding, but at the very least, they put him in a nice hot springs location to the point that even he admits it's not that bad. He gets maximum relaxation. He gets to build close bonds with the elite sorcerers that he's with every single day in hiding. It's really not that bad. And for 3 years, Iruha, despite hiding behind a happy face, stewed in darkness. He was very changed after Rokuhira's death. Even though he was living and hiding in protection, he admits that he really had no will to live and was ready to die. As the elite sorcerers and him are kind of gossiping, they talk about how Rokuhira might have a son and a 7th blade even popped up. Iruha doesn't feel anything about this. He's still in his depressed mode and feels like, you know what? That's a lie. He's an imposter. How dare he, besmirch my idol Rokuhira? Almost like a direct mirror to Sojo, who had this view of Rokuhira, right? Despite Sojo never even meeting Rokuhira, had this view of him and no one could tell them different. This is who my idol is. I put them on such a pedestal that they're above all other people, that they're not even realistic. Iruha has a picture in his head of how Rokuhira lived, and taking care of a son was just not it. It is interesting how so many people put Rokuhira on this pedestal, and honestly, the same thing happens to Chihiro. Hikori did it, and later on, we see Iruha, upon meeting Chihiro, feel the same way he felt about Chihiro that he did about Rokuhira. So there must be something special about this bloodline that just makes people want to work with them and want to idolize them. Obviously, as we know, the Hashaku invade Kokugoku Springs and kill pretty much all the elite sorcerers that are stationed there, using those Datenseki crystals that just energize them and make them strong as enchanted blade wielders. Everyone there is giving their life to protect Iruha from the Hashaku, and despite wanting to die, despite not really wanting to even be here, to disrespect their efforts of saving him would be messed up. So Iruha chooses to escape to the station, meet up with his new kamunabi bodyguards, and just go where the wind takes him. Now, of course, we also know that Hikori and Chihiro are the new bodyguards, and they find him almost immediately. Hikori even admitting that, yeah, you didn't really hide very well. You're pretty obvious here. Despite Iruha believing that no other bodyguards will exist like the elite sorcerers that he had that are going to be strong enough to defend him. And if you noticed, those sorcerers weren't strong enough to defend him either. So he really just has given up on everything at this point. He doesn't believe he'll ever get someone that's strong enough to defend him in the state that he's in. And we learn also why defending enchanted blade wielders are so important and why it's so prominent that they have such elite sorcerers and so much protection is because when you make a contract with an enchanted blade, you give up all your innate sorcery talent. You give up your sorcery ability, basically your ability to use spirit energy outside of anything not involving the enchanted blade, which means that when these wielders don't have their enchanted blades, which, surprise, surprise, all 4 of these people in hiding don't because the Hashaku stole them all, they have no way to defend themselves. They have no sorcery, and if they're not, a badass like Iruha shows himself to be, that's a pretty big problem. They don't have time to discuss any of this though, because they're immediately pulled up on by 3 to 4 Hoshaku sorcerers in absolutely no time at all. And if you remember, Hikori is still fucked up from the Rakuzachi. He doesn't really have a lot of spirit energy. He's really kind of debilitated right now. And upon casting his first spell, he immediately just drops, unable to do his bodyguard job. And Iruha has no choice but to step in and defend himself. Again, proving that even though he's only wielding an ordinary sword, he's, still a hardened warrior. He fought in the war. Without his, enchanted blade powers, he's still a pretty damn good swordsman and was able to cut up 4 sorcerers in no time just on his own. Thank God, because Hikori was no help. As they escape onto the train, Iruha realizes that they're surrounded by sorcerers on the train, around the train, everything. And he also asks the question, how many people do the Hoshaku employ? And honestly, I think that's a pretty fair question, because the amount of NPC death that has occurred in just these 47 chapters alone has to be over 100, maybe even in the thousands. I would love for someone to count, because wow, that's a well-running, well-oiled machine. How many ads on Indeed are we running here? But Hikori mentions, while everyone's distracted, that actually it's them that's surrounded, because Chihiro set up a trap in the train with his new powers of Enten after gaining so much understanding after the Sojo arc, the Rakuzachi arc. Chihiro's just an absolute badass now, and of course, he has to enter every single arc, killing a bunch of nameless people and walking up to someone badass as shit. And well, you know what? He accomplishes it. I can't hold him for that. In 1 second, Iruha immediately looks into Chihiro's eyes, sees Rokuhira, and falls in love for the most part. He goes immediately from Rokuhira has no son to, oh my God, praise Jesus, Rokuhira's back. You know what I mean? Like, these guys just have an effect on these people, I guess. And I will say, even though this arc has just begun, I'm interested to learn more about the enchanted blade wielders, not just Iruha, but the other ones. I'm interested to see what kind of threats we're going to be encountering on this trip back to the Kamunabi headquarters, I imagine. Are we going to meet another Hoshaku sorcerer? And are the other wielders in danger as we speak? Are they going to start attacking all 4? Or, one is already destroyed, but are they going to start attacking the other 3? Whatever this arc has in store for us, I'm excited to see where it goes. Chapter 48, the Goku Steam Squad. And it's a pretty big setup chapter, I will not lie to you, because the events of the next couple of chapters are definitely going to be what I'm tuned in for. But hey, I think the chapter does a great job of setting up the amount of stakes and tension that's built up, and I'm excited to get into it with you guys. So first things first, make sure you stop all the presses, hit that like button, and subscribe if you want to make sure you don't miss a single other Kagurabachi review and or any other series that you might read weekly or monthly. Most importantly, thank you guys for watching. So the chapter kind of picks up exactly where we left off last chapter, where basically Chihiro, Iruha, and Hikori are on the train on their destination to a temple that's going to keep everyone safe. Chihiro explains that they're just going to wait until the next stop, let all the passengers off, and then ride the train safely. And it's pretty clear that Iruha's fixation with Rokuhira, as we got last chapter and found out about, is really spilling full tier over onto Chihiro, because when Chihiro was like, oh, it's possible that I could be an imposter. Why are you so willing to accept me? Iruha is literally like, no, you are not Rokuhira's son. You're not an imposter. I know that for a fact. You are literally the reincarnation of Rokuhira. You have the exact same vibe, the exact same eyes and everything, which I feel like is crazy to the audience like us, because we've only seen Rokuhira act like a goofball, an absolute fool. So it's crazy to me that think the badass, super serious Chihiro reminds Iruha of Rokuhira, but I absolutely digress. Chihiro actually remembers Iruha from way back when. He saw a bunch of pictures and everything like that of Rokuhira and Iruha hanging out together. Iruha's just happy that Rokuhira, had that memorabilia. He's happy that Chihiro even remembers him. And Iruha immediately does not need any introductions or doesn't need to get acquainted. He's already accepted Chihiro as this person he's been friends with for years now, and is like, let me see Enten. oh my god, I need to pat this Enten and see its true authentic work. Oh, I love Rokuhira so much. And like, Hakuri's a little weirded out by all of this simping, but I would like to remind everyone that Hakuri literally was the resident Chihiro simp last arc, and I feel like it's pretty clear that literally all of apparently Chihiro's allies, apparently in Kagurabachi, are just going to be affected by Chihiro in this way. His aura is contagious, apparently. But after the 18 years that Iruha wasn't able to see Rokuhira, it just makes him delighted to know that while Rokuhira was off in hiding, because Iruha kind of confirms that the Kamunabi wasn't really the best of the best guys, as much as they did to hide all the enchanted blade wielders, hide Rokuhira. Part of the Kamunabi were still trying to steal the enchanted blades for themselves and take over Rokuhira. Maybe, who knows, if we waited a couple more years, maybe the Ishaku wouldn't have taken down Rokuhira. It might have been the Kamunabi themselves, because again, the world government seems a little sus. Chihiro is right to oppose them, and even Iruha mentions that it was probably a good idea for Rokuhira to go in hiding. Chihiro reveals it's been over 3 years since his death, and while it was a good time spent with his dad, he basically just catches Iruha up to speed on the Rakuzaichi, Sojo, the Datenseki crystals, everything like that, because while Iruha was able to see the Datenseki crystals in action, it is kind of crazy that they were able to get so many of these crystals mass produced in such a quick amount of time that all rival the enchanted blade's power. Like, it is so dangerous. Not even just because we saw Tenri almost die or basically fade away and melt away, lose all of his spirit energy because of using it, despite how strong he got. So the fact that if this is really the case, their only weapons are that compared to the enchanted blade are Flamebone and Enten. If the Hishaku has hundreds of these things, they're going to be just a little bit outnumbered, which Hakuri is, of course, the first person to realize. He's always using that big noggin of his. That's all he can do right now, since he can't exactly fight, which we'll see happen later on in the chapter. The worst part about the Datenseki crystals is that as long as they can continue hiring these random assassins to use them, the Hishaku themselves don't really ever have to come out of the shadows and fight themselves. They can just keep letting these soldiers do all the hard work for them. Even though Chihiro does admit that apparently one Hishaku member showed up to kidnap them, Iruha corrects him and says he showed up to literally just drop them off. He literally wasn't even a part of the attack. So we are up against some pretty stacked odds, especially considering that the Kamunabi, the people that we're working for currently, really aren't even our friends right now, right? Like, we're kind of like on a very thin ice relationship as it is. Half of that higher up group wants to kill us. Yeah, it's pretty rough, but Iruha challenges that and says Chihiro and Hakuri's calculations are all wrong. The Hishaku's plans are gonna fail because in Iruha's mind, they already have. He escaped, and with the amount of faith that he has on the Guardians that he spent 3 years with, he knows that they'll be able to do something and stop the plan entirely with the Hishaku. Iruha's not the least bit worried, which, you know, W friend, he definitely has confidence in them, and Chihiro even questions this, and he's like, are you sure they can, like, you know, do something about this? We flash back very quickly to those elite sorcerers in the Guardian. As soon as Iruha escapes, they immediately start fighting for their lives and actually doing pretty well against the Hishaku assassins. Iruha basically confirms that as long as they're just, you know, third-rate, regular, you know, mercenaries that are posing as assassins and sorcerers for the Hishaku, they stand no chance against this elite guard, you know, specifically because even with the Datenseki crystals boosting their strength, the elite soldiers may not be stronger, they may not be faster, but they have much better teamwork, much better coordination skills. Sincerely speaking, Iruha has full confidence they're going to be able to kick this bucket and win. And for a hot minute, we really truly do believe that, because we get multiple pages of them not only just winning against the Hishaku assassins, but basically clearing the entire temple and saying, hey, beat everyone. Let's go surprise Iruha at his destination. He'll be so happy to see all of us. And you know what? Honestly, that sentiment is great. And it is really sad what ends up happening to these guys in the long run, because they did seem like they were good guys. They did seem to have a good relationship with Iruha. And you know what? You really do love to see stuff like that. And it's a shame that Iruha had to lose even more friends. Not just Rokuhira after 15 years, but after this, he loses these guardians that he's had and spent all his days with for 3 years now. And the amount of emotional stability he holds when seeing them die is to be commended, because basically what ends up happening as the train starts to slow to a stop, Hakuri realizes that, there's not really that many people at the station. We didn't tell everyone to evacuate yet. And then we cut to 2 new characters that are introduced here. The person that we see talking, saying that they didn't think this would be, a fit type of job, but with the Datenseki thing, they were easily able to kill all of these elite sorcerers. The guy with the Hashaku member, as we find out, admits that they seem happy. And they reveal that Yura, most likely the leader of the Hashaku, or maybe one of the leaders, has spent all of this time prepping and making everyone wait, essentially, for 3 years before they actually moved and started their big plans to steal the rest of the enchanted blade wielders, now that they have the regular enchanted blades. So this person, who we find out is called Hirohiko, I believe, they are happy now that they can finally start moving, acting, and start fighting. They even mention that despite one of the people they're fighting against being the Enten, they go, we can just avoid Enten. We'd only have to kill Kumayori or Aruha. Shows how devious they actually are. And then Hirohiko reveals the incapacitated and possibly dead bodies of all those elite guardians from the Koku temple that were very happy to meet up with Iruka at his train stop, which is just sad. The worst part is this was all the plan along. Hirohiko admits that they worked hard to get all 4 of these dead bodies here, so that way Aruha and Chihiro would just run right at them immediately without any thought. This was the one part of the plan that they didn't expect, was that Chihiro has unstoppable aura. Chihiro and the Rock are 2 people that can dap each other up on the fact that they must have the same can never look weak clause in their actor contracts, because almost every week Chihiro's got a stunt on some character. It's impossible that we get a chapter that it doesn't have that. As the chapter ends, this new Hashaku member, Hirohiko, says, very interesting that you guys were able to hold frame. Let's see where this goes. And the fight begins. So let's see where this goes. Chihiro is going to be fighting an actual honest-to-God Hashaku member, and it won't be the leader this time. So maybe they'll be a little bit weaker. Maybe Chihiro's evolution is going to pay off, and he's going to do a lot better. We'll have to see. And in my opinion, the new Kagurabachi chapter was fun. I've been waiting for this week because I really wanted to see what this new Hashaku member was all about. We actually get full confirmation that this Hashaku member was not one of the 3 that was present for Chihiro's dad's death. So that's something. This is either a newer member or one that kind of sat in the background. And of course, as the Hashaku does, they've always got hundreds of people surrounding them. I don't know where, trust me, I've said it, I think, in almost every chapter review so far. I don't know where they get all of these people from. I genuinely do not know where they get all these people from. A couple of things that we do get confirmed this chapter, besides the fact that Iruha is a certified badass, this man literally sees his friends dead. And the Hashaku member that killed them goes, they're pretty tough, but we brought him here to piss you off so we could kill you, Iruha. The cool thing that I do actually like here is that this sets the standard for Iruha to be correct in his previous calculations. When Chihiro and Hakuri really thought they were going to be outnumbered in a lot of different situations, these people that died were able to fight the Hashaku. They were able to fight the Datenseki enhanced troops. They did a significant job. And not for nothing, Iruha is a stone-cold badass who, even though his friends are dead, he has remained completely emotionless, takes out the Hashaku members that are going after him and says, we've got a job to do. Do not falter. It shows the difference between someone that's been through the Seitei War, someone that's been through hardship and probably have seen millions of comrades die at this point. And I even love further into this that we'll see is that despite his friends that he put so much faith in dying and proving him wrong, he's still willing to put trust in people again, which is one of the most beautiful things. And I gotta give Iruha his due here. Iruha is turning out to be a really great character, and it's just what Chihiro needs to jump right back into action and start mopping the floor with nameless NPCs as Chihiro does. He's right back to his usual habits. Another interesting thing is the sorcery of the Hashaku member, that apparently they use blood and origami in a very interesting combination. Iruha makes note here, so it's possible he's either seen this sorcery before or he's just genuinely surprised that someone would use sorcery of this magnitude. Because at first when this came out, I was like, oh, what is the deal with this? You know? But what they do is they actually go through the bodies of the random Hashaku members and then spit that blood out at Chihiro. So whether they turn into blood originally, or they change into blood, or they're just completely covered in blood as they go through. The name of the technique is blood crane. So I think that the paper may either have, you know, properties of merging with whatever liquid goes on it, or it might be blood specific, but it completely blinds Chihiro and opens him up to attack. And as per usual, we kind of could have already guessed, the only real problem here is Hirohiko, the new Hashaku member. Because they're able to, amongst all of the chaos, just start playing with Chihiro and even start aiming attacks at Iruha without Chihiro even noticing. Hirohiko is definitely having fun in the situation while everyone else is stressed out. Whether you want to say how strong the origami magic is or not, even Chihiro eventually realizes later that they're not a member of the Hashaku for nothing. Another thing that's really lovely to see is the relationship between Chihiro and Hakuri and how far it's come, even though they've only known each other for such a short while. If you really think about it, they only knew each other for a couple days, maybe a day or so before the Rakuzachi. And this isn't even that far past the Rakuzachi because Hakuri hasn't even fully recovered his spatial manipulation ability. The fact that these people are able to bond and connect to the point that Chihiro was able to make a connection to the centipede attack that his father used back in the Rakuzachi way before, something that I didn't even catch up on. Like, it shows that these two characters, despite only knowing each other for so long, really were meant to be on this path together. They really have this connection that is almost seems determined by fate. Very similar to that kind of dedication Iruha feels for Chihiro's dad, Rokuhira. The fact that Iruha, once looking into Chihiro's eyes, immediately was like, you're his son and you're the spitting image of him. You carry the same vibe. I am dedicated to you as I was to him and I'm happy to serve you. Hakuri, if we think all the way back, despite he likes to rewrite history and act like not a Chihiro simp, was just as dedicated to Chihiro off of the fact that he saved him from that May blast way back when he was fighting Sojo. And Hakuri just followed Chihiro around regardless. Chihiro only kept him around because he was the Sazanami, conveniently enough. But again, Hakuri and Chihiro are almost linked in this undoubtable bond. And I wonder if Rokuhira, besides Iruha, had any other members of the Enchanted Blades or anyone else that worked alongside him that was like that. Maybe Shiba is that person. I will say, definitely miss Shiba. We feel his absence when he's not here. That's for damn sure. But this is where we get Iruha's big character moment, and this is the part that I really enjoyed, which was, again, despite his friends technically proving him wrong, he decides to still take this chance and trust Chihiro alone to take on this fight, which I absolutely love. He thinks back to Rokuhira. He thinks back to his friends that are literally dead next to him, and he says, Chihiro, I trust you. Fight this. And it also says so much about Iruha that Iruha was able to prove himself as a strong enough person to be left on his own. Because again, Hakuri, despite being the quote-unquote bodyguard, has no magical power right now. He almost passed out when he tried to defend Iruha. So Iruha has proven himself to be a warrior that doesn't need protecting from the nameless NPCs, or this could very much blow back on us entirely, right? Hakuri and Iruha's plan is simple, but it gives us so much leeway, and it does open us up to the deadlock discussion that we're gonna have to finish off the chapter, because what they're doing here is they're meeting up with actually another enchanted blade wielder, the guy who has cuts on his eyes and has the glasses. He's most likely blind. Their key strategy is if Hakuri and Iruha are able to finish the train ride and actually get to Senkutsuji, if once Hakuri's sorcery heals and he's ready to go, they're going to have 2 more enchanted blades on their side instantly. Not only will Iruha, who's already a badass, gain his enchanted blade back, be hyped up and ready to fight with the enchanted blade, this new enchanted blade wielder, who I imagine will hopefully be on our side and be with it, who is probably also equally a badass, will also receive his enchanted blade back. And now the Hashaku won't have those 2 enchanted blades. So what goes into a really interesting moment, Hirohiko questions him and says, "You sure about leaving Uruha on his own? You know, you think you could do that?" And Chihiro thinks again to how they originally thought that the balance of power was against them. They only have Enten and Flamebone, and sure, they have Shiba, they have Azami and everything like that, but fighting someone like Hirohiko, Chihiro realizes that, you know what? Those Datenseki crystals really aren't all that. They aren't as much of a threat as we thought. One, I mean, Chihiro was already able to take care of Tenri way back in the Rakuzachi arc, maybe with Shiba's help you could argue, but still, these sorcerers, despite dying to the Hashaku member, were able to fight the Datenseki crystal users of the Hashaku back at the temple that Iruha was staying at. So even though the Hashaku finished them off, Iruha at the end of the day was right. These guardians held their ground. These guardians beat the Datenseki warriors. They were on their way to meet up with Iruha. They did their job. The Hashaku member was the anomaly there. Chihiro realizes that they also have their own anomalies. They have Shiba. They have Azami, as I mentioned before. And if they can, as we spoke about, get those 2 enchanted blades in the hands of Iruha and the other enchanted blade wielder, we went from being outnumbered to equal in a deadlock of sorts to now, once we gain those enchanted blades, we'll be above the grain. We'll be the ones with the advantage because we'll have 4 enchanted blades up against the Hashaku that only have elite sorcerers that are above the level of Datenseki crystals, so they should be able to fight enchanted blade wielders. They can't even use those enchanted blades. We will have that much more firepower against them and be able to take them back, which is the one thing that invigorates Chihiro here. Now, the only negative aura I can give to Hirohiko, which actually I don't even know if it's negative aura, I would even say it's just correct villain work, right? Just pure correct villain work. Instead of choosing to fight Chihiro solo, take on the Enten like a prideful sorcerer, Hirohiko says, "You know what? I love that you're able to go out, and Yura's interested in you." So, we find out Yura is the quote-unquote leader of the Hashaku, who I'm not sure if he's the real leader or just the face. I feel like there's a shadow leader, but again, maybe I'm thinking too far into it. Hirohiko acknowledges Yura, and Chihiro even says that, it's too bad it's not the 2 of us, and this is what I'm talking about. Suddenly, all of these Datenseki crystal users show up right next to Hirohiko because they're not fighting fair one bit, and this is kind of what they also talked about as well, is as long as they have these disposable sorcerers, as long as they have all of these random people that keep applying for their Indeed ads, they will never fight fair. They will never take this seriously and fight honorably. Hirohiko proves that to Chihiro today. And Hirohiko even admits that they don't care if Yura is interested in them. They're gonna kill Chihiro right now, even if Chihiro wasn't their goal. Remember, they said this last chapter, right? Hirohiko was like, yeah, Enten's not even our goal. We can just avoid him and kill Uruha. Now, fuck it. You wanna solo? You wanna go all out and fight us? Let's do this. Chihiro, the badass that he is, every week he hits his weekly quota of badass moments. He squares up, thinking about his father's death, how much he has against the Hashaku, and that resolves him to fight hard. While I wish we would have seen more of Hirohiko and Chihiro fight one-on-one this chapter, I think next chapter is going to be the big moment where they actually go at it. This chapter was honestly a great continuous setup from last chapter. The buildup of the stakes is big. Again, Aruha's character, him holding frame and not disparaging his friend's death as a Jujutsu sorcerer would or something like that, you know what I mean? Like, holding frame as a strong warrior would and fighting, not only just for himself, but telling Chihiro to continue fighting and not worry about him. These characters, even though they might be all alone, even though they all have different roles to play, if they're able to pull this off, the deadlock that they've been in for 3 to 4 years now after Rokuhira's death is gone. It's over. And you know what? I'm excited to see if they can do it, even though I know the Hashaku probably are already thinking of ways to go around that bullshit. But I'm interested to hear what you guys have to say, or I'm interested to see if any of you guys kind of have an idea of how this arc is going to go. Do you think Akori and Aruha are going to actually make it to the next Enchanted Blade Wielder? I'm honestly worried that the other Enchanted Blade Wielders are already being attacked. There's no way the Hashaku, one, have all of this manpower, and we're going to go and assassinate the sword bearers one by one. I have a feeling that we're going to find out the other temples are also going to be under attack as well. And if they're not already, we may reach the temple and we'll be like, yeah, we made it. And then, oh, shit, everyone's dead. The Enchanted Blade Wielder is already dead. And then there's a Hashaku member wielding an Enchanted Blade already. That would be gnarly. We're going to be going over the character Samura, the new Enchanted Blade Wielder that we were introduced to at Senkusuji Temple, and just why exactly that despite being a blind swordsman, this man makes the temple, according to everyone there, invincible. Basically what we learned in the last chapter, because unfortunately I was out of the country, was Senkusuji Temple is definitely much more prepared for the threat of the Hashaku than the previous temple was, simply because despite the extra experience, despite the strong sorcerers, and despite the added factor of Samura being there, the truth is they're much more prepared because they watched the previous temple get decimated. They've already known that the attack is coming, so they were better prepared for it as opposed to the previous temple that kind of got caught off guard. They were able to get a lot more reinforcements and basically just make sure that the temple defenses were much better than what they needed to be at previously, because not for nothing, the Datenseki crystals are making a big difference in the war between the Hashaku and the Kamunabi. The fact that any of these nameless NPCs can achieve the exact strength and power of an Enchanted Blade Wielder is scary to think about, because before, when we've seen Chihiro just cutting down people with no problems at all, I mean, that basically leaves little stakes. We're not really worried about these guys. Now that they can be as strong as Tenri, a character that was able to fight on the same level as the Enchanted Blade Mei, scary. But getting into the main point of the chapter, because the chapter is named Samura, basically covering all of the reasons why he is an absolute badass and why he is quote-unquote invincible, despite not being able to see anything. All the while, Hakuri is being treated for his restoration. He is essentially powerless at the moment. He is still, despite weeks passing, not able to recover his ability to access the storage dimension. And that's a main problem because our whole entire point of gathering these Enchanted Blade Wielders is so Hakuri can create a connection to them, and therefore creating a connection to their Enchanted Blade and being able to pull those blades directly from the Hashaku's storage base and immediately break the 3-year deadlock that has been going on, because all of these Enchanted Blade Wielders, despite not being able to access sorcery, they all gave up sorcery in order to wield these enchanted blades, right? Essentially making them powerless regardless of their physical stature, because as we see, Aruha is still pretty strong. He's a great warrior, but he's not going to be able to fight maybe 100 Hashaku members at once, let alone an actual tattooed member. But it seems like in the character that we're introduced to, which is Samura, this new Enchanted Blade Wielder who even Aruha claims is a strong and competent master, he's the reason why Aruha was able to become such a badass. In that quick couple chapters ago, we saw him slice off a couple people's arms like it was nothing. So still, not being a sorcerer, this guy is able to use his swordsmanship skills to kill even Datenseki crystal users, but we'll get into that. Samura is, if you don't already know and it wasn't completely obvious, is the trope of the blind samurai. This character who lost his eyesight, either was born blind or in Samura's case actually made himself blind, and we'll get into the reason why later, but the blind swordsman is able to tap into their other senses. You've heard the age-old myth, if you lose one sense, your other senses compensate, they grow stronger. So if you lose sight, your senses of smell, your senses of hearing, everything like that are going to be amplified tenfold, 20-fold, who knows how fold, because essentially without sight, your brain can focus even more on these 4 senses as opposed to 5. And the blind samurai plays directly into that, because the blind samurai has always been able to use their hearing, their smell, everything around them and the environment in order to make up for the fact that they literally can't see. You would think not being able to see in a fight would be, that's it, you know, that's it, that's all she wrote, you know, you literally can't see me run at you and punch you in the face. But when you're able to rely on your hearing, which is basically the air resistance of that person's fist going through the air, you're able to rely on the smell, that BO that's coming off of this enemy that hasn't showered in 3 fucking weeks. I mean, you can use all of this information presented to you to counter. And because you're still a badass, just because you don't have sight, you can still train your body, you can still become an awesome sword blade wielder, you can still learn great fighting styles. I mean, there are even direct fighting styles that are primarily based on being blind. The blind swordsman is definitely a scary legend that has been used multiple times in different media, so I'm excited to see the way that it gets used in Kagurabachi, and it's already being used to an insane degree, which is pretty unique, by the way. Of course, as I mentioned before, Samura does rely on smells. He's able to smell his old acquaintances because he's become accustomed to their scent. That's how he's able to find Shiba in a crowd in that flashback last chapter, and that's also why he thinks that Chihiro smells so much like Rokuhira, and he's able to tell he's Rokuhira's son instantly. He also mistakes Hakori for Chihiro just because Hakori and Chihiro have spent so much time together, their scents have kind of molded together, but I digress. Smell is only for close acquaintances. Samura relies on sound, just as I mentioned, being able to hear different things and being able to hear air resistance and the way that things move against surfaces is very important when you can't see. But what makes Samura so dang unique is the way that he uses sound, because let's be clear, it's pretty obvious, especially with, again, the way that the blind samurai trope has been used in not just media, but in legends and myths and all across. It makes sense that some of these Hishaku members, as they do, are like, oh, he's using sound to respond because he's blind. Let's just be as silent as possible and fuck him up that way. Which, honestly, good on them for figuring that out, because that's just, you know, blind samurai counterattack 101. However, if Samura was just trying to nerf himself because he's so damn strong, that is not the case at all, because if anything, it seems like being blind has amplified his powers tenfold. The reason why Samura cut his eyes out, or at least slashed his eyes closed instead of being born blind, which is definitely an interesting moment, is because he wanted to cut himself off from all worldly passions. Being a very devout Buddhist, it seems, Samura wants to get as close to Buddha as possible, which requires reaching enlightenment. And I don't know if you guys know anything about enlightenment. You probably know the bare minimum, but going into enlightenment, it really requires a lot of work. And when I say work, I mean it's essentially separating yourself from the material world in general, which means you're separating yourself from desire, you're separating yourself from emotion, you're separating yourself from basically being a normal human being as it is. As Buddha's enlightenment essentially made him godly, that's what a lot of Buddhists assume. You know, I may be wrong, again, I'm not a Buddhist myself. That's what a lot of Buddhists aspire to, which, I mean, granted, it's definitely an interesting way of life. There's a lot of Buddhist monks that are literally out there accomplishing great deeds, not for necessarily the world, but for themselves and for the spirituality and for enlightenment in general. Because if you really think about it, separating yourself from desire, separating yourself from the normal ways the world works may not do the world great, but at the end of the day, it may do the self great, which is what's always important in my eyes. At least I can definitely get behind that. And I'm sure there's going to be Buddhists in the comments that either correct me or tell me that, you know what I mean, that I'm kind of on the right way, which I very much welcome. I would love to learn more, and I would love to be as correct as possible when describing this philosophy of life, because it really is insane. And there's a reason why characters like Samura and other characters throughout history and fiction are more than willing to devote everything they have to Buddhism and to reaching enlightenment. That being said, Samura is, of course, human at the end of the day. It's not an easy task to erase your desire. It's not an easy task to remove yourself from wanting, to remove yourself from human emotion, because even Shiba brings up comically that Samura, literally the day after making that decision, was very upset because he could not read his quote-unquote girly mag that he wanted, which of course is a worldly passion for sure. I mean, yeah, wanting to get your rocks off, definitely. And he gets so angry with Shiba criticizing him for this, to which Shiba reminds him again, hey, you know, you're getting angry right now. That's an emotion you literally said you wanted to avoid. So I think it's hysterical that, you know, of all things going on, Samura is still a character. He still has a personality. He's not a wandering, you know, emotionless, desireless character that is just cool, calm, and collected. He has a personality that, try as he might, he can't separate himself from. Regardless, his swordsmanship speaks for itself, because this man uses echolocation to fight. we see him take out some pretty easy Hishaku members. Basically, what Samura does is when he sheathes his sword, he smacks the hilt against the wood of the sheath, therefore creates that quick little oscillating sound, and then that creates an echo. So just as bats locate their prey, bats locate their ways to go, he literally fights like a bat. As soon as that echolocation goes out, he's able to pinpoint, okay, this person is 5 meters away from me. This person is 15 meters away from me, to the left and to the right. And that's how he's able to essentially trick his foes, because again, everyone's gonna think he's going by sound, which isn't necessarily wrong, but it's not necessarily right either, because he is just doing it in such a unique way that even if you're as silent as possible, as soon as he smacks his hilt down on the sheath, he's going to be able to echolocate you. So he's using the sheath sound, not everyone else's sound. I mean, sure, that helps, but that's very interesting, and it explains how he was not only able to keep his swordsmanship skills intact, but be able to increase their level and increase their unpredictability by becoming blind. It's in no means a handicap for this man. This man is so strong, he's even slicing Datenseki users in one hit, which is absolutely insane. Again, these are characters who are supposed to be on the level of an enchanted blade wielder, and he's just dusting these people, no problem. Of course, he feels the need to smoke an entire cigarette in one drag, which is impressive, painful to watch, right? For anyone that's smoked a cigarette before, you know that's insane shit. But on top of all of that, he apologizes because he's desecrating not just the Buddhist area and the temple that they're in, but also generally because he's just defying his own logic by doing this. He's very self-aware, right? Because as he charges all of the people he's killed, telling them that they're gonna go to hell because they're doing wonton killing, which is essentially merciless, unnecessary killing. It's not justified whatsoever. He's just murdering. They're just murdering people for no reason, no good of it. He even admits, hey, you know what? I'm probably guilty of the exact same thing. So at the end of the day, as much as he is devoted to his cause and wanting to remove himself from all worldly passions and gets angry when people criticize him for it, he's a realist in the sense that he knows he can't separate himself from every sin that sin is necessary, unfortunately, in this world. And as invincible as Samura makes the Senkutsuji temple, the monks at the temple are also doing a really good job at keeping the Hishaku members at bay. Even though the Hishaku have increased their soldier force tenfold simply because it didn't go well at the last temple, they nearly won. They lost to Ruha, so, you know, it was a failure overall, but they decimated the temple, and with Hirohiko, they were able to take out the elite sorcerers that did delete their Datenseki crystal users. So they've learned, and they're just adding more numbers to it because, again, those LinkedIn applications apparently have no absolute end. And the thing is, this just worries me because we still have 2 more temples. Sure, we're taking on, you know, the brunt of the force here at Senkutsuji, but what's going on with the other 2 people? Are the Hishaku going to attack those at the same time? I mean, that would make the most sense to me. I can't believe they're going one at a time here, so I'm going to hope that, because we've never seen Shiba fight on screen, I would love to see Shiba just defend a temple and an enchanted blade wielder by himself. And with Shiba and finding the perfect character to bounce off of, I know there's a woman enchanted blade wielder. She might be perfect to bounce off of Shiba with as just overall personality. And then there's another enchanted blade wielder who we'll just have to wait and see what's going on with them. And I'm sure the Hishaku, with a level of handicap, I should say, that we've gotten, if Hikori, 1, restores energy and is able to tap into the enchanted blades, but 2, we've already saved the Ruha. If we're able to save Samura and party up with everybody, we're going to be pretty freaking undefeatable. Because obviously we have not gotten into Hirohiko versus Chihiro yet. We don't know how that's going. I imagine we're saving that for one big whole chapter, and we're going to get into that maybe later, maybe next week, maybe afterwards, because Chihiro's first major fight against a Hishaku member, besides the leader, because the leader was kind of just taunting him. So we're definitely going to focus on that. And apparently he'll have new information on the Hishaku, which is what Hikori is hoping for. But imagine Chihiro takes out Hirohiko or something else goes on. I think the Hishaku need to balance the stakes. We have gotten so much, the scales have been tipped, right? So I'm waiting for them to tip back, because the Hishaku look like people that think of every eventuality, so I'm wondering how they're going to respond. At the very end of the chapter, after watching Samura beat the brakes off of all of these Hishaku members, Datenseki crystal wielding or not, we essentially get formally introduced to the man, the myth, the legend himself. The master of the Ioi, sorry if I mispronounced that, Ioi White Purity Sword Style. The original owner of the enchanted blade, Tobimune, Samura Seichi. And I am very much excited to see more of Samura and more of his badass blind swordsman style fighting and everything in regards to it. But most importantly, I'm excited to see what the hell happens with Chihiro and Hirohiko, which I'm hoping we get into next week. But this latest chapter of Kagurabachi just introduced, in my opinion, one of the most interesting character dynamics that Hokuzono has decided to delve into, because genuinely, I think we should ask this question up until this point after seeing how much carnage has really been laid out throughout the 50 chapters or so of the series. Is Chihiro a monster? Literally, like, if we look at everything objectively, take away our bias with Chihiro being the main character, what separates someone like Hirohiko, a Hashaku member who does not care about the people that he kills, to someone like Chihiro, a right now rogue swordsman who doesn't care who he kills in order to get the revenge he needs on his dad? What separates these two? Chihiro fighting for justice? Let's be real here. The world isn't black and white, or it may just be that very thing. How many people has Chihiro killed so far in the story of Kagurabachi? I think someone put down in my comment section a couple chapters ago, we were rolling into about 90 plus bodies that Chihiro has racked up, at the very least on screen, because we have to imagine there are definitely more that have hit his closet before we even carried in those 3-year time skip between his father's death and now. And at this point, since that chapter, I'm sure we've at least reached the hundreds. And like, sure, you could argue that the Hashaku, the villains of the story, again, the antagonists who killed Chihiro's dad for absolutely no reason other than to absolutely destabilize the entire, not just political spectrum of the country, but just the vulnerability and weakness of the civilians and innocent people that can't defend themselves against enchanted blades with magical freaking powers. We saw what the Shinichi was capable of, right? If all of these swords get into the Hashaku's hands and the wielders are then taken out in this arc, or at least 1 or 2 of them, if we're not able to break this deadlock that has lasted for the last 3 years, always being 1 step behind the Hashaku, I mean, we are definitely going to be entering a big issue here. But again, if you think about it, Chihiro just running through these cities, no one knows who he is, destabilizing the mafia, destabilizing the people that are in power. Sure, you could argue he's doing it for good. He's definitely acting as a very Batman-esque, fighter of the night. But again, Chihiro kills people and asks questions later. And what happens when one of these people, these NPCs that Chihiro just slays, what happens to their families? What happens to their children? What happens to, again, we also have to remember that a lot of these people now that we're fighting in the Hashaku are literally just people that are answering Indeed applications, something that we get into later in the story, believe it or not. We finally get an answer to that. So Hokuzono is definitely doing a great job and putting all of his focus on the narrative and plot of Kagurabachi, which I can't ask for anything more of. The overall scary thing that I'm trying to get at is Hirohiko, sure, is definitely being a dick when he's like, you and me are the exact same, bro. But the thing is how many people has Hirohiko killed? We obviously don't know that number, but the weirdest thing is, no matter how many people that may be, who knows at this point who has the higher kill count, right? It could be Chihiro for all we know. And I think that's the overall point that Hokuzono is trying to make here. And I think that's even something that we see in Seichi Samura from last chapter, who is just an absolute badass and invincible. He brings the blind swordsman trope to a whole new level as like blind Batman with like echolocation. That's twice that I've had to reference Batman in this chapter review, which just goes to show you the amount of efficiency these characters are hitting these nameless NPCs with. Even Samura understands that he may be responsible and guilty of wanton killing, even though he's again fighting for quote-unquote justice, what he believes is right, which you should always feel the right to do. You should, in my opinion, I mean, look, you gotta stand for what you believe in. I'm never going to argue that whatsoever, but it is interesting that the story is again bringing up this nuance here of even though, sure, you're fighting for what you deem as right, as in general, is killing ever moral? Can killing ever be moral? But either way, while the temple is safe in Samura's hands for right now, and Hikori is focused on recovering, being able to enact their plan of getting their enchanted blades back, Chihiro and Hirohiko are finally able to start their fight that we have been waiting for, I feel like, a couple chapters now. At least that's what Hirohiko would want you to think, and Chihiro, because he immediately just turns into little bits of paper and floats away and teleports away after having his little dynamic with Chihiro. And he just leaves his little crystal NPCs to take care of Chihiro. But you know what? At this point, after what I've just already said and the amount of chapters we've gone through, we know that if you don't have a name, you are just gonna get diced up in 1 to 2 slashes. I mean, no matter how intricate and convoluted your character design is, if Hokuzono doesn't name you, you're cooked, bud. Now, immediately having Hirohiko just teleport away and just procrastinate the fight made me feel like, oh my god, no way is Chihiro just gonna slay some random nerds this chapter and we're not gonna get the fight again. What is gonna be so good about this fight that Hokuzono does not want to show us this? Have you noticed that whenever there's something great, like seeing Shiba fight on screen, or something like this, it's like, we're gonna get to it. Oh, we have to wait. But you know what? This isn't the case. This isn't the case. And I was genuinely very happy to see it because Hirohiko is someone that he bides his time. He has no need to take down Chihiro right away. I mean, if you really remember it, their goal isn't necessarily to even take down Enten, even though he admits that it wasn't a bluff, that he has the potential and power around him to do so. I think one of the most interesting things in regard to this chapter, and the reason why Hirohiko doesn't want to fight Chihiro right away, is to further prove his point. Chihiro denies the fact that he would be the same as a heinous criminal like Hirohiko. But if you really think about it, as I mentioned before, there's not too much that separates that, and I think Hirohiko would rather spend his time, even though he gets revealed that he's cut with his stomach, he's actually bleeding out. I don't know if he's on borrowed time or if this is just like a flesh wound and it doesn't matter to him. It's enough for the person that's sitting next to him in the theater he decides to hold out on while his remote paper origami attacks are hitting Chihiro and messing with his trajectory and his senses as he's fighting the Datenseki crystal NPCs. The main argument that Hirohiko is trying to make here is going a little bit more into it. Hirohiko admits that from the age of 3, he's learned that killing was always an option to get what he wanted. And from that point on, when he realized that, he knew that no other child around him was the same as him. No other kid his age would see the world through his eyes. And that is until today when he meets Chihiro. Sure, the Hishaku members are all people that probably see things the way he does, but they all seem to be adults way older than him. Hirohiko wasn't even present during the attack on Chihiro's father, so he is at the very least a newer Hishaku member, which is the perfect matchup between these two characters, because before the age of 18, not only was Hirohiko's hands stained with blood, but so was Chihiro's. For a character that for a long time felt that he had no peer, he had no other person his age to feel the same with, Hirohiko is just glad that he can share this bond with Chihiro. And I think there's some merit to that. But before that point hits home, we actually do get a brief little touch base on the Datenseki crystals and how the experience of the wielder absolutely matters. We went from thinking that every single Datenseki crystal user had the power of an enchanted blade wielder, or at least something close to that. But it turns out, actually, that's not always the case. Because they've had so many randos, as Hirohiko literally puts it, that have just signed up on Indeed and they're just taking whoever applies, a lot of these characters have never really fought that well. And, you know, you could take all the steroids you want. If you don't know how to fight, you could get your ass beat by someone smaller very easily that knows what they're doing. And I think that's what Hirohiko is pointing on at this moment. And I love that because it proves that even though they can just distribute all of these crystals to as many people as they want, they can't necessarily compare with someone like Chihiro specifically, who's been through 100 bodies at this point and is easily able to deal with whatever fighter comes his way, especially if they're not quick enough with the beat. But these people are selected sorcerers, so they're even more experienced wielders of the Datenseki crystal, which is why Chihiro has a little bit more of a problem with them. But not too much of a problem, because he is still able to immediately dome all of these people, disembowel, and just take out all of their limbs, and just every word you can think of in just a couple sword slashes as per usual. So even selected sorcerers of the Hoshaku are nothing to a real enchanted blade wielder like the Enten, like Chihiro Rokuhira. So that's good to know. It makes me a lot more confident that they're going to be able to break this 3-year deadlock. Before Chihiro slams through the ceiling though, something that I think is interesting to harp on is the short little play that Hirohiko does go to see. Apparently it's the story of the hero Sasuke, where the hero Sasuke slays a black ogre and returns peace to the land and saves his family from harm. But I think one of the most interesting things about this is it could be potential foreshadowing, because Hirohiko mentions that it's dull. It's boring. The hero wins too easily. That's not a good story. That's not something fun to read. So that's the first layer, is that this isn't going to be your average Chihiro saves the day and everything is good and we get the happy ending story. At least we can hope so. Disney Kagurabachi isn't happening, so don't start saying those words today, community. Another way that we could look at this though, Hirohiko mentions the black ogre, the bad guy of the story, right? Does eventually get killed by the swordsman Sasuke. But the Black Ogre, I think, is a really good foreshadowing for Chihiro as well, if we are to go with this whole monster narrative that Hokuzono is beginning to craft. Because as Chihiro rips through the ceiling and kills all the people, and decapitated heads are falling down onto the stage in front of all these just normal passerby who are just trying to have a nice show and are now traumatized for the rest of their freaking lives, they all run in terror. They're screaming their heads off and freaking out. The only person that's sitting there very calm and cool is Hirohiko, who goes, you know, you look like a monster to the ordinary human, showing up with multiple dead bodies and looking like you just, like Dante in the beginning of Devil May Cry 4, if you understand that reference. Like, no matter what, if you don't have the context to what's going on, you're scared. But again, we bring up the point of, even if you have context, is Chihiro not a monster for the violence that he commits almost daily at this point? Something that really does make me enjoy the character development between these two is, let me walk you through a fake scenario here. This isn't real. This is all, you could even consider this headcanon, but I wouldn't, even because I don't believe this. Let's say Hirohiko, someone who had to kill from an early age. What if the reason that Hirohiko had to kill from an early age is because a kamunabi agent slaughtered his dad in front of him? And from that moment, Hirohiko was left to the streets and had to fight on his own and resort to thievery and resort to killing people. And eventually, he could never be a normal child because of the hardships he faced going forward. And the Hoshaku, who are sure a criminal organization, give Hirohiko the option to take revenge on the people that killed his dad and made his life so damn fucking hard. What is the difference there between that fake Hirohiko backstory and Chihiro's backstory? Sure, you could argue the Hoshaku are a criminal organization and the Kamunabi are the political organization of the country. But again, we have to think here. We've met the Kamunabi higher-ups already. They don't really seem like the most great, peaceful people, right? They're a little corrupt. I mean, kid killing definitely isn't above any of the Kamunabi. So just because they're the world government and they commit the same crimes as the Hoshaku might, because again, a lot of the Kamunabi wanted to kill Rokuhira once the war was done and wanted to end the threat of the enchanted blade wielders forever, or not even end the threat, but take the enchanted blades for themselves. What is the difference here? Just a fun little thought experiment that I think really hits the point home of what Hokuzono is trying to tell us in this chapter, that no matter what side you're on, and again, even this harks back and was echoed by, I'm sorry for that, I apologize, Seichi Samura's point of, sure, you know, you guys are going to hell for wonton killing, but I guess that would make me also a resident of hell myself. At the end of the day, the only person that can actually understand Chihiro in life, and we even do see this with Hakori, while being a great friend and great ally to Chihiro, isn't really someone that can, I guess now he can with his fucked up, childhood and life, but Hakori's never really had to stain his hands with blood, at least until this very last moment. Whereas this character is able to relate to Chihiro at a much deeper level, no matter how much Chihiro wants to deny it. I mean, even at the end here, you have Chihiro being like, yeah, well, it's your guys' fault that I'm like this. You forced me to be this way. When, again, did they force him? Did they put Enten in his hand and say, come and kill us? I mean, even if they did do that, does Chihiro not have the power to walk away? I'm not saying that that's the correct decision. I'm not saying that Chihiro needs to be a reincarnation of Buddha and, denounce all of his material and worldly desires like Samura is trying to and just give up on revenge. I want to see Chihiro obtain that revenge, but I think it's important to remember the kind of monster that revenge requires you to be. And with that, I'm definitely excited to see how this fight continues between these two characters that, as much as one of them wants to deny it, are destined to meet and destined to relate to each other by fate. Even Sojo, I think, was a precursor to this, giving Chihiro a reason to not think his philosophy of his father's swords was the only philosophy to exist. Sojo gave Chihiro the nuance that, maybe I'm not the only one that can properly wield my father's swords. And at the end of the day, his father even gave him this lesson that these are weapons of death and people are going to use them for whatever purpose they see fit. And every single enchanted blade wielder will have their own reason for taking up the blade. Chihiro needed to learn that lesson. So I'm very interested to see what Chihiro learns from the mirror image of himself. Hirohiko could just as very well have ended up the same as Chihiro and vice versa. So I think that's what to expect next chapter. As far as Hirohiko's origami powers, I'm interested to see how they work in a one-on-one fight. That's all I'll say. So Kagurabachi continually asks one of the most important questions that I think the fight between Chihiro and Hirohiko is going to focus on, which is what makes a monster? What makes a killer? What is a justified fight? And what is an unnecessary slaughter? Some of the major themes that have been brought up in the previous chapter is really just, is there such a thing as justified killing? A lot of people brought up last chapter all the good things that Chihiro has done and all of the hero things that he has done that completely stop him from being considered a villain. And I think this chapter really answers that to a huge degree, because you have to consider both sides of the coin, right? Chihiro has, sure, gone out of his way during the Rakuzachi to save as many innocent people as possible and protect them from the Shinichi. He took care of Care, the girl that was involved with the Datenseki crystals, and even though we don't know where she is, we can pretty easily rest assured that she is safe. And also, he just has a lot of wholesome moments with her. Chihiro is really good with kids, surprisingly. And we can't forget that he helped Hakori just become his best self, reach his full potential, and overcome that insane family trauma that was really holding him down. But when you look at things objectively, we also have to remember here, Chihiro has slaughtered at least over 100 people by now that he does not know. Who knows what kind of family they have? Who knows what kind of friends they have? He has directly defied the orders of the state government and opposed the kamunabi at every step of the way, and has also declared himself an enemy of that state should they refuse to hand over his father's enchanted blades at any point after this assassination arc. Now, granted, we have to remember that the kamunabi government really isn't that great either. They have been more than willing to not just hurt children, but they were the ones that wanted to kill Rokuhiro originally and take the swords for themselves. Realistically, the Hashaku just got to them first. But one thing that I think really gets harped on this chapter that separates Chihiro from just being your average villain or just another monster killer, compared to Hirohiko, who, when you look at Chihiro, who clearly has reasons to do what he does, he's going for his father's revenge, he wants to save the world from the enchanted blades. Hirohiko, sure, he's a killer, but what reason does he have to kill other than just, being a dick? Hirohiko just kills simply because when he was young, he learned that it was a good thing to do to not only get where he wanted, but to continually survive and get by. Whereas Chihiro does not share those ideals in any way, shape, or form. But I think one thing is important is, even though you can't necessarily call Chihiro a villain, you could definitely put the title of mass murder on him. And I think the words from Samura Seichi during this chapter prove that even though you're able to be a mass murderer, you don't have to fully dive into the darkness and become that monster. You may be a monster, but you don't have to let it take over. Because one of the most important things to remember is that it's very easy to look at a quote-unquote hero from afar and admire them. Someone swinging a sword, killing the bad guys, and doing it from behind a screen, it's very easy to be like, oh my god, he's the hero. That's our perspective. But when you realistically and objectively look at everything, take away what Samura or Chihiro or any of these good guys are doing their killing for, and it does not clean them of the blood that's on their hands, especially when you've gotten to triple, quadruple digit numbers of body counts, like someone like Samura who fought in the Seichi War may have reached. I'm sure the Seichi War was fought for good reason, and clearly the enchanted blade wielders were enough for them to win. However, again, that doesn't make Samura's body count any smaller, and I think that's the main point that Hokuzono is trying to make. Sure, Chihiro does things for good. Does that wipe his slate clean of all of the morally gray actions that he does? And I think in this chapter, we get that answer. Because again, you look at Chihiro, who still has his humanity about him. He's still able to make friends with Hikori, have a good relationship with Shiba, take care of kids like Care when he can. Whereas Hirohiko, like, literally does not have any humanity whatsoever. Hirohiko is the perfect example of someone that has not only became a monster through their killing, but has allowed that monster to overtake them. They have devoured themselves and become true evil. That jadedness through killing is the exact reason why Hirohiko doesn't even know how to make friends. The closest thing that Hirohiko can get to a friendship is this interaction he has with Chihiro, someone that's at the same age as him, you know, not a normal person by any means by this age. And Hirohiko only knows fighting and death. And so that's why he goes, you know, I don't really know how to make a good friendship, so maybe we should just try to kill each other and see what comes out of that. Which is, again, showing that someone like Hirohiko has fully become evil. Chihiro still, despite fighting through the darkness, holds on to his light. And this is shown completely when the fight heats up, because as Chihiro does his best to fight against the Hishaku member, the villain of the story, starts abusing all of the innocent audience members and starts throwing them into the line of fire. His papers are clearly able to conceal his vision, so as Chihiro starts throwing his sword around, he almost starts decapitating people that just got caught up in the paper storm. And this proves that Hirohiko, despite being a Hishaku member, definitely is not one of the strongest Hishaku members by any means, because we have the leader of the Hishaku who was not afraid to get right up in Chihiro's face and fuck with him entirely, whereas this person will refuse to get close to Chihiro in any way, shape, or form, because they literally admit that, hey, look, if I get close to you, get close to an enchanted blade, I'm gonna die, so I'm playing it safe. So this guy, especially with his young age, he is a newer Hishaku member. So Chihiro being able to surpass this guy of all people doesn't necessarily mean too much, although it is satisfying to see Chihiro be able to best a Hishaku member, one of these assholes that killed his dad, even though Hirohiko wasn't there. He was too young. What this does point out to is that for all of their differences, Chihiro and Hirohiko, they do have similar resolves and determination. We have seen Chihiro multiple times throughout the story do what needs to be done. And what I mean by that is take risks, be willing to sacrifice himself or whatever is in the environment in order to achieve his goal, and whether that be saving people or helping people, it's usually always for a good thing. Whereas Hirohiko has the same level of determination, willing to do whatever it takes to win. However, his evilness has that resemble something much differently, which is, again, just being willing to sacrifice as many people as possible to get to your goal. Really two sides of the same coin, and it reminds us again that while Chihiro is a murderer, while you could call him a monster, someone that normal people do not look at normally, you can definitely still describe him as a human. Whereas Hirohiko, not so much. We do get this nice little reference to the Sasuke the hero play one more time from the previous chapter, and Hirohiko once again puts into perspective that there is a part of the play where the hero lets the villain actually full on get away because the villain took hostages, and Sasuke wants to save the hostages more importantly than fighting and defeating the villain, which is full-on referencing the fight that we're currently having between Chihiro and Hirohiko, because Hirohiko ultimately believes that in order to do what must be done, in order to achieve your goals, you should just admit that you are a monster. You should just, again, let that monster consume you. Stop trying to pretend to be a good person and do good deeds in between all of your bad deeds, and just accept who you are as a person. Hirohiko says that Chihiro is already a killer, but he constantly tries to act like he's not. So the right move, Hirohiko believes, is Chihiro should kill these innocents in order to get to Hirohiko, because Hirohiko admits multiple times Chihiro has multiple outs of this moment. He could slash with Enten and kill maybe 2 or 3 people, but still get out of the storm. He could use Nishiki and destroy the entire area, killing Hirohiko, but also multiple people in the process. But because Chihiro is such a good guy and is so rejecting this philosophy that Hirohiko believes is objectively true, Chihiro doesn't have a win condition in this moment and is going to let Hirohiko win. As we see, death by 1,000 cuts in Hirohiko's paper all hit Chihiro at once, and there's a pretty good chance that Chihiro could have died here, which, although you could argue Chihiro just isn't willing to accept his fate and would much rather die than give in to his evilness, I think it just highlights this difference even more, that Hirohiko, as much as he wants to believe Chihiro is just like him, they couldn't be further from the truth. We get one more flashback to Samura Seichi, and he reveals that the real reason that he blinded himself, besides all of this Buddhist stuff, would be because he couldn't stand and live with himself actually viewing the death that he caused. Watching himself cut through people was too much. Yet, despite blinding himself and absolutely hating the work that he did, all despite this, he pushed through, took an enchanted blade, and fought in that war. The answer that Samura gives to Chihiro is, look, I know that I'm going to hell and I'm a monster. I'm a big murderer and there's nothing that could stop me from killing people. But the best I can do is try to make my path as a monster as holy as possible. Something that Chihiro accepts and brings into himself, which is his character development for the moment. Hirohiko was not able to reach Chihiro, and while he taught Chihiro a lesson, it was the exact opposite result that he had hoped for. Chihiro accepts that, you know what, Hirohiko, I am a monster. I am going to hell. But at the very least, not only can I save as many people as possible on this dark path of a monster, I can also only bear my fangs at those who deserve it, the other people in the darkness like myself, you, the Hashaku. And as Chihiro cloaks himself in Nishiki to endure all of those 1,000 cuts, he does one of the coolest, most raddest things in the world. We get that Chihiro badass moment finally hitting our quota. He chases Hirohiko into the darkness, diving into that abyss, and eventually Chihiro doesn't stay in the abyss and the darkness like Hirohiko does. Chihiro emerges in the other side into the light as he stabs Hirohiko through the hand, shoves him against the chair, and ends this fight, which is just beautiful. A lot of people may not appreciate that the Sashaku fight went so quickly, but I think the most important part of this fight wasn't the actual hands being thrown. It was the lesson and the development that Hirohiko was meant to act as an obstacle for Chihiro to overcome and become a better version of himself. And I think that's exactly what we got. One thing that this short little story segment does bring up, and a lot of people in my comment section mentioned it last week, which was, this is very similar to Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance if you've played that game. There is a short interaction between a character named Monsoon and a character named Raiden. And this is essentially the same thing, whereas Raiden is constantly killing people, doesn't really ask questions about the people that he's killing, he just does it in the name of justice. And Monsoon, the villain, says, well, what makes you and I different? And I think this is the important thing. You can fight for yourself, stand up for yourself, fight for what you believe, and even kill the people that oppose you. While admittedly, this does make you a murderer and this does make you a monster, while you're able to walk the path of darkness, you do not need to let the darkness consume you. And I think that's one of the most important lessons that can be taught in a story like this. If Chihiro was to say, I'm a hero, I'm not a monster, I'm not a killer, you're wrong, he probably would have lost this fight against Hirohiko because he wouldn't have been able to overcome the philosophy that Hirohiko was spitting at him. And most of the time, that's the most important part of a fight. Not so much the hands being thrown and who has that last ultimate attack, but who ends up being right in the long run, and who has the power to make that righteousness reality. All I'm saying is I am excited to see what happens in the next chapter, whether it is picking up with Chihiro and Hirohiko having their final moments, which was a very interesting relationship between the two of them. Very much, I saw all the people that love the Yuji and Mahito references. Now, whether it was intentional or not, the fact that Hirohiko was the perfect fold to Chihiro's personality in the moment was, again, a great piece of development for Chihiro as a main character, and I'm excited to see where this philosophy goes going forward. I'm also excited to see what the hell is going on with Samura Seichi, someone who we haven't seen in the present time, has now flashbacked multiple times. So Hokuzono clearly realizes how much we love this guy, and I just want to see more of him. So let's see how his echolocation is doing in his temple, and see if Hakori can save the day and get us 2 extra enchanted blades. So after watching Yura play on the playground on a mechanical horsey while plotting world-ending catastrophes, I have to say we can all rest assured that he is legitimately the biggest threat that Kagurabachi has to offer, and one of the most terrifying characters in manga that I've seen in the last couple of years. Listen, I don't know what else to say. If you're able to ride a horsey while maintaining all of your aura, then you're just built differently. It is what it is. But it seems like he might not be the only person that's built different in the Hishaku, because as we find out in this latest chapter of Kagurabachi, Hirohiko might not be leaving the series as early as we thought, and I'll definitely admit to being wrong on that one, because the conversation that we get with Yura as he's squeaking back and forth on the cell phone is that he believes that the kamunabi are pretty easy to read. The fact that they were desperate enough to include Chihiro in their defense against the raids against the sword blade wielding temples basically spells out to Yura that not only are they short on manpower, but they are very worried about what's to come. And if this war is really about to break out, it seems like everything going forward, Chihiro protecting Aruha and Samura all being in the same temple, and the Hishaku admitting that they have a trump card, this is all going as I planned. He even admits that even if all 4 temples were to end in failure, it's really not all for naught, because the main point of this mission was to accelerate Hirohiko's development. But even more importantly, he's been able to confirm that despite sending as many of their different guards to all of these different temples, they have not laxed their guard on the Tokyo headquarters whatsoever, which basically makes him think that they will never stop protecting the Shinichi wielder and putting all of their maximum power on him at all times. Now, it makes me think that with how much effort they're putting into not just the Shinichi, obviously it's one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful enchanted blade, but they're also putting a little bit of effort on finding the Shinichi's wielder. Whether this is just because the Shinichi's wielder needs to die so they can use the Shinichi themselves, or because the Shinichi wielder is someone that's sympathetic to the Hishaku cause, we have yet to see, because not for nothing, that guy was more than willing to just start abusing the Shinichi's power as soon as it was awakened at the Rakuzachi and just start killing people for no reason. So I don't know if this guy's the best guy either. Let alone there is that huge theory circulating online that this Shinichi blade wielder might actually be related to Sojo, just based off, the fact that they look a little bit alike. Now, who knows if this is true, but we do know when Sojo was alive and he was fighting that sorcerer who puts you in illusions, Sojo was put into an illusion of a flashback of a bunch of people dying in like a very dark, destructive way, and it's possible that that was the Shinichi happening. So maybe this is Sojo's brother or someone that caused that to happen to Sojo. The way that the Seitei War is and how this world that Hokuzono has built is building, it seems like every small little event leads to another event. Every cause has an effect. And if that's the case, it would also make sense why Sojo grew up to have such a bastardized interpretation of Rokuhiro's will and be like, yeah, they're all for death. I'm going to become the strongest death dealer. And like, speaking of Sojo, I think the fact that the secondary goal of this raid is to accelerate Hirohiko and turn him into a person that is not only better controlled by Yura and the Hishaku, but is able to become a potential enchanted blade wielder himself and grow into this all-powerful being that Yura has supposedly been raising from a very young age. Because after losing Sojo, they were down not only an Enchanted Blade wielder, but with Chihiro taking Mei back, they've been basically at a lower power level since that moment. And again, it's basically confirmed that if they want to storm the Tokyo HQ and actually either get the Shinichi under control or get the Shinichi wielder on their side, they're going to need at the very least the power of an Enchanted Blade to do so. Especially after seeing how easily the Datenseki crystal users were handled in this short little arc so far, they're gonna need something better than that. So not only are they focused primarily on getting these Enchanted Blades to wielders on their side as quickly as possible, they're setting their sights on the main Kamunabi HQ right after all of this. So who knows how long this assault is planned to last. On Hirohiko, it seems like Hirohiko was either raised by Yura from a young age or was kidnapped and turned into a whole Stockholm Syndrome situation where now he's just a pawn that Yura can use. Yura specifically mentions that he has not let Hirohiko experience the outside world for a long time. Hirohiko has just been building his bloodlust, building his killing abilities, and learning terrible ways of accomplishing things. And has Yura so interested in Hirohiko isn't his origami magic, because even Yura says it's kind of underwhelming. It's not really strong. What made me interested in Hirohiko was how quickly he mastered it and how exceptional he is at using it and making it even more versatile than a normal origami sorcery power should be. Those paper cranes are pretty cool and they're great for fighting in like a group battle or in crowds, but as Chihiro showed last chapter, on one-on-one, that origami sorcery isn't shit. But Yura hoped by being in charge of this raid and being in charge of all the forces and actually commanding different things and making different moves, not only would this allow Hirohiko to grow, adapt, and develop, it would allow him to experience this war in real time as opposed to just learning about it. And we do see this development in real time because despite missing both of his arms, Hirohiko is still alive and breathing and facing down the barrel of Chihiro's sword. Hirohiko is having the hardest time understanding why Chihiro doesn't agree with his philosophy. He thinks we're both killers, we're both people that have taken blood and taken lives without thinking twice about it. You and me should be the same. You and me should be best friends. But Chihiro denies that because the thing is while Hirohiko, as we find out, has been sheltered and kept inside for who knows how long, Chihiro has experienced the outside world and has learned important lessons. Especially with bringing up Sojo before, Chihiro learned that if someone doesn't think the same as you, that doesn't make their interpretation of things wrong. Sojo's belief that Rokuhira made the blades for absolute death and destruction, that was what Sojo believed and what Sojo was putting all of his effort into, and Chihiro had to learn to not only accept that, but defeat that. In the world of ideas, in the world of battle, you can have your own beliefs and everyone's perspective is valid. It's the people that fight to the death over their beliefs and are able to have the strength to conquer other beliefs to prove their own existence make all of the difference in the world. Despite the fact that they both kill, Chihiro and Hirohiko will never be the same. Chihiro kills for justice, for revenge for his father. Hirohiko kills because he wants to or because that's what he's always been told to do. It's not the same by any means. Hirohiko has no value on life, whereas Chihiro is the exact opposite. Which, through this loss, Chihiro is able to teach Hirohiko, and despite Hirohiko believing this to be friendship, what he actually learns is the reason why we're fighting, why me and you are fighting to the death, is because we're different. Our beliefs are different. They don't have to be the same, but the fact that we are able to fight to the death and prove them against each other makes us the same on some level. So learning that definitely set off Hirohiko's dopamine receptors. He loses his mind and immediately just starts spilling the beans to Chihiro. He's like, hey, you know what? The Hishaku has 10 members, and I was the leader of this charge specifically so we could find enchanted blade wielders. And this is all going according to Yura's plan, who's not worried about anybody. In fact, honestly, the only person he is worried about is Shiba, who the other Hishaku member is looking for. More potential man, off-screen glaze for Shiba, who we don't even know where he is at this moment, but I hope we see him fight soon. But Hirohiko isn't revealing these secrets because he's lost. Hirohiko is revealing these secrets and going in line with how Yura feels about the situation, because with everything set up perfectly, he feels like now he's won. Because despite him not wanting this trump card to come out, it seems like Yura has officially launched the trump card, because as we switch back to Senkutsuji Temple, as Samura is taking care of all of those lame little Datenseki crystal users, suddenly a bunch of trees break out and almost destroy the entire temple in like one single go. That original sorcerer, the first Hashaku member we ever saw, has finally made themselves present and is getting on the battlefield to fight Samura, which is pretty scary seeing how much damage he was able to do. Samura is a badass, don't get me wrong, but the death flags are waving. And learning that there are 10 whole members of the Hashaku, 4 of which we have never even seen before. We've seen the ones that have killed Rokuhira. We saw the 2 that were at the train station, Hirohiko and the other Hashaku member. Scary to think, what if they're sending these people to the other temples? What's going on at the other temples? We're so focused on Senkutsuji, Iruha, and Samura, we don't even know what's going on with the other 2 people. The Hashaku have plenty of reinforcements, and as we also see in the chapter, they are already anticipating that 2 of the enchanted blade wielders are going to die. Whether that be Iruha and Samura, with Mr. Treehugger fighting them and killing them because Hakori is still recovering and hasn't finished recovering. They can't recover on the fly either, so the fact that this big battle between Samura and the Treehugger going on, it's completely interrupting them and they cannot continue their plan, getting them their enchanted blades first. Who is going to get the enchanted blades first? Is missing arm Hirohiko gonna somehow regenerate and gain his blade? And who is the other Hashaku member that is waiting for an enchanted blade as well? Is it Yura? Is it someone we haven't seen yet? There are a lot of questions that this chapter has immediately started to build up and has added a lot of stakes to the already climactic arc that we're going through. Because as soon as Iruha and Samura die, if they do, these Hashaku members are guaranteed ready to start that contract with the enchanted blade as soon as possible. And however Hirohiko gets his arms back, he admits that he's sorry for not coming fully prepared, and now with this enchanted blade and Yura's glaze of saying that he's going to learn very quickly, Hirohiko with the enchanted blade may become everything that we wanted Sojo to, replacing Sojo as Chihiro's foil and becoming a Shaku member that will literally oppose Chihiro at every step, and they can learn their enchanted blades together. The most recent chapter of Kagurabachi is potentially and finally introducing us to the first major sorcerer battle of the entire series, which may be taking place between Hakori and all of the different soldiers of the Senkutsuji Temple and the Datenseki crystal holders and the senior member of the Hashaku that's using all of these different deep forest emergence jutsus, which coming right after the win that Chihiro was able to get on Hirohiko, the younger Hashaku member, I think it's definitely time that Hakori gets his dues. Despite Yura or John Hashaku, as all of you comedically corrected me in the comments last video for, having full faith that everything that the Hashaku is doing right now is going to plan, the remnants of the forces of these enchanted blade wielder temples are not going to be giving up that easily and are going to protect their enchanted wielders with their lives. Last chapter we learned that Hirohiko, the young Hashaku member about the same age and experience as Chihiro, was the one that was in charge of all 4 of the temple raids, all in hopes of John Hashaku developing Hirohiko's intelligence and his character using real-time battle as opposed to logic and studying inside of a room, which is just a subtle way of reminding everyone that there are still 2 more temples that we haven't even touched base with. We're so focused on Iruha's temple and the Senkutsuji temple, where we know all of the kamunabi and Hashaku forces are currently centered on right now. But either way, all of this commotion is acting as enough of a distraction for the Hashaku to supposedly just safely transport 2 enchanted blades on paper cranes that Hirohiko is using to slowly just get them to the people that the Hashaku is planning on turning into enchanted blade wielders and forming a contract with them after they kill either Iruha or Samura. Which is just crazy that 2 of the most powerful weapons of all time can just casually get Amazon drone lifted to these locations. And it's mostly just because the Hashaku know that as soon as the enchanted blade wielders are dead, they can take their plan into action. So as long as they can get the blades to where they need to go, who cares how long it takes to kill the other swordsman? Not for nothing, it seems like from Yura's main conversation that their primary goal is acquiring the wielder of Magatsumi, or the Shinuchi, because that's why they don't have to take all of this seriously. Not only is this just a training exercise for Hirohiko at the end of the day, if they fail,
their whole goal hasn't even been attempted yet. Especially when what may be their trump card or may not be their trump card, the older Hishaku sorcerer that we met all the way back in chapter 1 fighting in Senkutsuji Temple opposing Samura Seichi, it's gonna be tough for anyone in the Senkutsuji Temple to do anything, because as we're quickly able to see, the controlling of trees and vines, which is definitely similar to a Senju Jutsu from Naruto, the Hishaku sorcerer is just easily able to surround the entire temple with all of his magic and is just sitting back letting his Datanseki warriors just fight Samura and wear him down until he can get a kill shot. And despite Samura's advanced senses and smell, the Hishaku are well aware of the legendary wielder they're going up against right now, which is one, the biggest downside of being a legendary warrior, because if someone is hunting you, they're gonna know everything they need to go against your perfect vulnerabilities here, which is what they're doing. They are actually just letting sonic boom explosions and smoke screens just out in the open. And sure, it might be debilitating their sense of fighting, but it's making Samura's chances of fighting almost impossible as all of his senses are dulled. Now, the one good thing going for Samura is that it is revealed that regardless of his echolocation or sense of smell, he is able to rely on things like evil intent or hostility to actually maintain his position in battle, basically being able to defeat the Datanseki lackeys still, but as is obvious of the vines and trees that are being conjured by the senior Hishaku member, they have no will of their own. If all of the senses are dulled for Samura and he can't even feel any kind of hostility from these branches or trees, then they literally don't exist and they are just hitting him at every turn, slowly overwhelming Samura to the point that the other soldiers in the temple feel like they have to jump in and help him in the fight, even though we just spent so much time explaining that Samura Seichi is invincible, especially when he's on the field alone. Fighting in the same vicinity as Samura Seichi is just gonna throw him off entirely. And because the Kamunabi's goal is recovering Hikori as much as possible so that way he can use his storage space to just transport the blades right to their wielders and immediately thwart the Hishaku's plans, the problem is it's going to take 30 whole minutes to actually recover all of Hikori's sorcery, and right now they have literally only spent 10 minutes doing everything they can. All of this has happened in 10 minutes, meaning while Hikori does have access to her storage space again because he's basically completed half of the ritual, he's at such a low stamina point that overexhaustion could not only risk his life and just cause straight up brain damage. If that brain damage sets in, even if Hikori is able to survive it, it might remove all ability that he has to access the storage space. So with basically everything they have at their disposal used, they have no choice but to send in their last resort, a special task force called the Makazumi. As previously mentioned, Seiichi Samura's blind nature just makes fighting with him on the battlefield very disadvantageous as well as dangerous. Because of all the familiar smells and sounds of his friends also crowding the fight and the fact that he has to focus on his enemies, he's not only able to have a struggle of finding out who is who and who's friend from foe, but because all of this shit is going on, he literally just cannot figure out how to fight. And as we see with Iruha later in the chapter, Samura almost decapitates Iruha on sight as soon as he enters the battle if Iruha wasn't correctly attuned to Seiichi's fighting style, which is, all things being said, a cute little reveal that Iruha actually owes his own badassery to Samura's sword style. It's revealed that they both are students of the EI White Purity style sword technique, which is the exact reason that why Iruha, despite lacking all that ninja training the Mikazumi has, is able to adapt to Samura on the fly, and also just makes sense why he is such a badass without having any kind of connection to the enchanted blade he's contracted with. Now, the Makazumi specifically are special sorcerers and soldiers that have all been trained to join Samura in battle, and the task force's leader is actually even a young child who idolizes Samura enough to just copy his whole flow with the sunglasses and everything. But it's explained the reason why they're so easily able to slip in and out of Samura's battle style is they're legitimately ninjas. Every member of the Mikazumi is excellent in the category of stealth, able to neutralize all of their scent and sounds in the middle of fighting, meaning that as far as Samura is concerned, these additional warriors don't even exist unless they make their presence known. They literally have to tell him, that they're on the battlefield with him. And by matching Samura's strikes and hitting in his blind spots, the Mikazumi can effectively clear a path for the blind swordsman, letting Samura fight without all of his senses being dulled or his enemies taking advantage of that blindness. The Mikazumi can protect Samura from all the attacks he can't sense, and they can continually reduce the number of foot soldiers that he's fighting against. However, try as hard as they might, there is literally no way in sight that they can make this senior Hashaku member actually come down and make himself vulnerable. He's hiding all the way up in the sky with his trees while all of his lackeys do the work, and the trees and the forest emergence attacks continually come. Because Hirohiko focused all of the Hashaku forces on Sekuji Temple, the reinforcements are just never ending, making Samura and the Mikazumi fight in a battle of attrition that they are actually slowly just beginning to lose, because no matter how hard they keep fighting, there's no end in sight to all of these different people, and the vines and trees don't help at all. Now, this is a good and bad thing. Obviously bad because the fact that the senior Hashaku member is able to encompass this entire temple with his sorcery, as well as having an unlimited number of Datenseki warriors to fight Samura with, it does, on the good side of things, mean that if Hikori, Aruha, and Samura are actually able to escape amongst all of these distractions, they can genuinely get away, because if you remember, everything they have, the Hashaku right now, is focused on Sekutsuji Temple. If they can just keep them fighting in Sekutsuji Temple while all three of our VIPs are well on their way out of here, then we may just be able to get out of this situation with at least one of our enchanted blade wielders alive. Because again, remember, despite Hirohiko having no arms, he is transporting the two enchanted blades, and John Hishaku did all of this for Hirohiko to have an awakening almost. So it wouldn't surprise me if at least one of these warriors, as sad as it would be, dies in this exchange of an arc. But what's scary to think about is if this senior Hashaku member is not the trump card that Yura was speaking about, which I literally would not put past a man that was willing to bounce back and forth on a horsey while plotting world domination. And if that's the case, they actually may be one step ahead of us already. But as the remaining soldiers of Senkutsuji attempt to create a teleportation mandala that will be able to get the two sword bearers and Hikori out of Senkutsuji Temple to hopefully just try and recover his sorcery elsewhere, Hikori finds it despicable that everyone here, even the low-level servants and soldiers, are risking their lives, yet he himself hasn't risked his life once this entire arc. And it's time for that to change, at least according to him. Despite the potential loss of his sorcery forever being held over his head, Hikori's willing to take that chance if it means putting that same amount of heroic effort on the line that all of these low-level foot soldiers are being willing to do for Samura. And after a Chihiro victory over Hirohiko, or at least a temporary victory depending on what happens with this bro's arms, it is nice and it should be customary to give Hikori, the Dortoragonist, his shining moment of this arc and let him go head-to-head with this senior veteran Hashaku member, sorcery to sorcery. Now, it's gonna be interesting because the senior Hashaku member is obviously taking a backseat approach to this fight. And with Hikori's speciality of sorcery, he's kind of all about teleportation, transportation, all of those different things. So he can also act in the background, and it will really become a chess fight between two intelligent warriors. The young new sorcerer with an OP magic ability, and the old veteran experienced sorcerer who is pretty strong, but might not have the same OP advantage that Hikori does. Who's gonna win? Is this Hikori's moment? Are we gonna actually see this big time Hashaku member lose? I doubt it, but I'm still excited to see what the heck is gonna happen in this fight to come. It is an understatement to say how integral Hikori Sazanami has become to the overall plot of Kagurabachi since his early introduction during the Rakuzachi arc. With his very relatable introduction of dealing with his family trauma and overcoming his emotional oppression from his father to stand up to him and become this confident self that we see today, it's obvious why he's become a series favorite. Which is why when one of the potential costs of Hikori using his sorcery here could end up with him suffering brain damage, let alone not just scary because he could lose sorcery, but lose his entire life, it makes sense. Last chapter, we were introduced to the group of elite warriors known as the Makizumi. They are a small family of shinobi warriors that date back centuries, even before the official establishment of the kamunabi. By dedicating themselves to their chosen master, they serve as tools to protect and serve and sacrifice their lives for the greater good, which definitely shows Hokuzono's Naruto influence for sure, because this comes up very often in early Naruto, especially during the Zabuza and Haku arc, and it comes up later, please don't crucify me, but these self-sacrificing ninjas plan to essentially act as the main distraction so that way they can build this mandala teleportation and get Hikori, Samura, and Uruha out of this dangerous situation because their lives are pretty much the most valuable as of right now. With the veteran Hoshaku sorcerer dealing in sorcery that is creating giant trees that are basically crushing the entire structure of the temple, and all of these Datenseki crystal warriors are literally just crowding like zombies to fight, we don't all want to die pointless deaths here. It makes much sense to get all of the important VIPs out of Senkutsuji Temple. And the reason why Hikori is also considered a VIP is because how integral his sorcery and storage facility ability is to what the Kamunabi wants to do to break this 3-year deadlock they've been in with the Hoshaku. By making a connection with the enchanted blade wielders, as we saw all the way back in the Rakuzachi arc, the connected person to whatever they have a spiritual connection with can immediately teleport that out of the storage facility. Chihiro did that with Enten, and the goal is to get the enchanted blades out of the Hoshaku's hands and teleported back into Iruha and Somura's hands so that way they can get a huge amount of power. However, because of Hikori's overuse during the Rakuzachi arc, he needs to heal and he can't use his sorcery to its full ability. It's gonna take 30 minutes to heal Hikori with the ritual that the Makuzumi was doing to him, and unfortunately, they were only able to get through about 10 minutes. However, knowing Hikori and the way that he does not want to be one of the only people that's putting their lives on the line to help save Somura and Iruha here. So he tries his best to summon its storage power and do the connection thing right now. However, he immediately collapses and passes out because he's nowhere near able to fight at this moment. And Hikori's dedication is admirable, you have to admit it. But even the Makuzumi member that was with him admits that Hikori really isn't the one who should be pushing themselves right now. Again, it's the Makuzumi, all of these ninjas that are fighting alongside Samura that have dedicated their lives and been raised to be self-sacrificing tools. They are much more disposable than people who, if they die, they jeopardize the entire country's stabilization. And it's here that we cut to a short flashback with the Makuzumi 3 years ago when they all met Samura, and we see that similar to Iruha, Samura had standards for his bodyguards that he didn't want them to just be random bland pawns that just bodyguarded him and protected him with no reason whatsoever. He doesn't want to be a privileged old general who needs his ass wiped. He doesn't need all of his needs taken care of in life, even though he is technically disabled. Despite the Makuzami being quote-unquote tools by design, Samura just does not believe in that kind of blind dedication. Samura wants a team of people who don't feel bad about imposing on one another, who can really lean on each other in times of struggle, not just some team of ninjas that will recklessly give their lives and will have to be replaced the next day. And this just continues to solidify how just great of a person the enchanted blade wielder Samura Seichi is. There's a reason why Shiba let Samura be the only person that actually got a chance to see Rokuhira's hiding spot and actually meet Chihiro as a child, because he is one of the greatest swordsmen to ever do it. I mean, there's a reason why Samura is so legendarily regarded by all of the people that he meets, to the point that he's even being looked up to as a role model by Chihiro Rokuhira himself, of all people. Even after Samura and the others do escape later on in the chapter, he has to have a full screaming match and argument back and forth with Iruha, because Iruha just wants Samura to stay put and keep himself alive, but Samura does not want to let other people give up their lives for him if he's not fighting alongside them. Now, to Iruha, a wielder who also just lost all of their friends slash bodyguards of 3 years, I mean, no one is going to be able to relate to Samura any more than him, especially after these ninjas just put up all of this big fight to get these guys out of here. It would be disrespectful to their deaths if we didn't just run away right now. Iruha understands the plight of the curse of being an enchanted blade wielder more than anybody. The Makuzami's deaths will mean something if they're able to survive and keep fighting to a next day. However, if they all die, not only will the Makuzuma's deaths be pointless, but Samura's will also be pointless, because the Hoshaku will just get an enchanted blade on their side and probably kill way more people than they could have beforehand. And I don't know about any of you guys, but the way that Samura keeps getting talked about as well as built up with all of these different flashbacks and people glazing him, I definitely see a lot of death flags around him, and they're waving and they're going high, they're raising high. But it's a good thing that they all escaped Senkutsuji and Iruha convinced Samura to not go back to the temple, right? Anyway, just going back in time for a little bit, after that Makizumi flashback, Samura does his best to try and raise the Makizumi into a relatable team of friends that can lean on each other. It's just not going to be the case as much as Samura wants to believe it. He declares alongside them that they're going to tear them to shreds, basically meaning that he's going to fight to the death and fight alongside them, even though it's clearly a losing battle with the amount of being outnumbered that they are, I should say. Samura is more than willing to give his all to fight against the crushing force of the never-ending Datenseki zombies, we might as well call them. That's what it feels like. We're on about round 10 and they're about to call hellhounds. Not only that, the veteran sorcerer of the Hishaku is just basically destroying an entire temple with his spells. So it shows that he is super duper powerful, and he is clearly going to be a much more endgame boss for Chihiro or someone else to fight. Thankfully though, the enchanted blade wielders that did spend a lot of time together, specifically Iruha and Samura, Iruha knows Samura well enough that not only does he realize that Samura is never going to leave this battlefield voluntarily, he pulls a trick to get Samura to get teleported out of there that probably only someone that spent years alongside battles and war fields with this person would be able to pull off. It's no surprise, and we've already talked about it, that the Hishaku's tree sorcery is just coming from all different angles. And one, trees don't have any will or hostility, so it's already hard for Samura to keep track of. But there's all this noise, all this smoke, all these different people are fighting in the midst of this group battle, so Samura can't use any of his echolocation at this point. He has to rely on hostility alone. So Samura, relying on his bloodlust and relying on other people's bloodlust to lead his attacks, Samura slashes and suddenly ends up being blocked by Iruha of all people, because Iruha increased and amplified his bloodlust. Not exactly sure how you would do that, but I'm not a swordsman in wartime, so maybe I'm just not familiar with the method. They're able to trick Samura into the mandala's range and get all three of them out of there, as I talked earlier about in the chapter. And that brings us back to the Makizumi flashback one more time, because despite Samura doing his best to try to change the ninjas who they are as people, we remember the quote that they gave him when he first brought all of this up. They don't need Samura's empathy. They will all die as tools, and they will die as tools regardless of what he says. They've always intended to do that from the beginning. And I love just this harking back to the disparity between Iruha and Samura, because one, it shows at first just one, how good of people Rokuhiro was able to recruit to fight alongside him in their Seite War and give these enchanted blade wielders. Of course, we don't know the other two, so I can't speak for all of them, but Samura and Iruha are pretty cool. However, it is very interesting how different they are in times of crisis and situation, because again, while Iruha is much more political in the decisions that he makes, understanding that his life is much more valuable than these people that are willing to give it up, Samura relies much more on emotions and impulsively doing what he believes to be the right thing in the right moment. However, it's ironic that Samura of all people is this character who is all about Buddhism and following enlightenment. He cut his eyes just because he didn't want to have worldly attachments. However, it's these worldly desires that keep him acting this way and keep him acting irrationally, because someone that's reached enlightenment would probably be much closer to Iruha's stance on the situation. It proves Shiba right from all the way back in that flashback where he met Chihiro, that no matter what Samura does to try and prove his otherworldliness and his dedication to Buddha, his worldly attachments will always keep him down to earth. In the final moment of the chapter, when Samura almost goes to just risk his life anyway, which would probably be a really stupid decision, thankfully, Hakuri awakes and manages to struggle through a storage facility spell one single moment, and not one single moment later, in a flash, Samura is able to reconnect with Tobimune, his enchanted blade. Whether or not there will be lasting consequences to Hakuri for this is unknown. He might even be able to do this one more time and get Iruha's blade, Yukimori, back. However, with what we know with the possible brain damage, we'll put a pin in that and just hope Hakuri is okay. Because now, with Tobimune in his grasp, Samura is able to level the playing field at Senkutsuji instantly, figuratively, and literally. He uses that first technique, Crow, and within moments, the battlefield is completely flooded in feathers that just cut all of his enemies and the different trees in half. Samura has regained the handicap in this fight and has shifted the momentum of Senkutsuji with one attack. However, I'm curious to see how the veteran Hashaku member responds. Is he going to retreat? Is he going to keep fighting and stand against an enchanted blade wielder on his own? The main reason I ask some of these questions is because the Hashaku have clearly been planning this for a while. Even though you could argue that John Hashaku Yura admitted that they can fail because it's all for Hirohiko's development, I don't think they would be willing to lose this 3-year power struggle that easily. And it makes me wonder that could we still potentially lose Samura? Could we still potentially lose Aruha? We are not out of the woods yet. Hirohiko is clearly also waiting with no arms for a blade himself, and Samura's death flags have not lowered whatsoever in my mind. So I'm just keeping an attentive eye on everything that's going on. We will just have to really see what transpires next. I mean, a lot of the community has actually theorized that one of the other enchanted blade wielders that we have yet to dive into may even be a traitor and may be on the side of the Hashaku. We have no idea what's going on with them yet, and I do think it's weird that why would they only focus on these 2 temples? I have to imagine they made attacks on the other 2. We've only seen 2 to 3 Hashaku members, and there's apparently 10. Are we just gonna cut in another chapter to a destroyed temple and a new wielder? Or maybe like we'll cut to a different temple where Shiba was the only person required to fight off the Hashaku member, and we get to see a 1v1 with Shiba? I mean, we can dream, right? My main question is, what do you guys think is going to happen in the future? Obviously, big chapter, and I'm definitely excited to see that a enchanted blade is back on our side. How long it will remain on our side and how long until the Hashaku get their own advantage, we'll just have to wait and see. What do you think about one of the members being a potential traitor? In the aftermath of the awakening of the enchanted blade Tobimune, something that we really thought was going to be an amazing thing for the Kamunabi and the protagonist group because it was going to help break that 3-year deadlock they've had with the Hashaku, actually turned out to be one of the biggest stark contrasts and turns in this little war that we're going to have between the Hashaku and the Kamunabi. Things are actually so much worse than we thought. We fought so hard to avoid this crisis. The Swordbearer Assassination arc has been nothing but struggle, strife, and effort on the part of people like Chihiro, Kokuri, and the enchanted blade wielders, at least the 2 of them that we've come to know so far. And yet, we should have seen the signs when Yura was swinging on that horsey on the playground, not worried at all, and saying, yeah, you know what, this seems like it's all kind of going according to plan. Let's just see how things play out. We should have known from the start, because in the wake of the Mikazumi, the ninja group, the elite people that were helping and protecting Samura in that big brawl that was going on at Senkutsuji Temple, they sacrificed everything they could to try and save Aruha, Hakori, and Aruha, teleport them out of the temple and have them escape. Literally, amongst that, Samura was doing his best to completely derail that entire situation and risk his life to save his men, which commendable, but again, I think the enchanted blade wielders are a little bit more important, but let's get into that a little bit later, shall we? Hakuri eventually risked his brain damage to give Samura back Tobimune, which I did see some confusion in regards to this, so I just want to give a brief explanation, just as a quick refresher. Hakuri Sazanami has access to the hereditary technique of the Sazanami clan, which is the storage house sorcery, where he's able to mark things with his spirit energy, bring them into his storage house world that is separate, like a separate realm of society. By marking any object that Hakuri pleases, he can teleport them in and out of his storage house, depending on how much spirit energy he actually has. After using all of it during the Rakuzachi, he needs to be healed for 30 minutes, which is why he can't use his full power now. The hack that they figured out during the Rakuzachi arc, by marking someone like Chihiro, who has a spiritual connection to their enchanted blade. They are literally contracted and connected at the soul. By marking Chihiro, Hakuri actually gains access to the enchanted blade by proxy and can then teleport something like Enten into his storage house and then back out of his storage house into Chihiro's hands to wield, just because they are technically the same identity. By marking them with their spiritual energy, he immediately creates that connection with Kumayori and Tobimune, even if they're in the Hashaku's hands and grasp. By making that connection with Samura at the end of the last chapter, they were able to immediately teleport Tobimune from the paper crane transport to Samura. And hopefully they are going to be able to do this with all of the enchanted blade wielders. At least that was their goal. We even saw amongst all of this bloodshed, Chihiro evolve off his philosophy into someone that was willing to accept his anti-hero role, countering Hirohiko's mindless bloodlust and saying, I am not you at all, and humble the armless Hashaku Jr. And again, after getting Tobimune, Samura was able to completely decimate all of the Hashaku forces and Datenseki Crystal Warriors to the point that veteran sorcerer guy, the tree guy, just wanted to get out of here and leave. He said, oh geez, I'm escaping right now. I'm not dealing with a master enchanted blade wielder. Wondering if he's gonna be in trouble, which makes me question if he even knew what was about to happen. With the tree sorcerer gone and all the Datenseki crystals defeated, Aruha and the others felt comfortable enough to say we've won this battle, to the point that when Hikori tries to transport Kumayori to Aruha, everyone's like, nah, you know what, you've already stressed yourself enough, we've won, let's just move on. And at this point, everything seemed great, but we've never been so wrong before. Hikori really just wants to give Aruha Kumayori, but everyone's like, nah, stop, you're not gonna do it. Which is, again, a big flaw. Meanwhile, Samura is overlooking all of the people that died in the temple during the fight, and we focus on this 122-year-old monk, Fura. Unfortunately, it was his first time doing guard, which is just very sad. He came 13 years ago as a young child to be raised here, and then died as his first time as a guard, and he didn't even collect his salary. He sent it to his younger sister back at home. So now, that younger sister is going to have to figure out how to live her life without her brother, and someone that dedicated their whole life to being a monk had to fight in a battle that they probably didn't sign up for. And it's here for the first time where we really see Samura Seichi struggle and his true beliefs on the value of the enchanted blade wielders' lives, which is going to be expanded on much farther into the story as we see going forward. But even last chapter, we saw a little bit of it with him being willing to risk his life, despite him obviously being an MVP to the Kamunabi and extremely important to the state of the political landscape and just the stability of the country. However, we never really knew the true extent of his self-loathing and his hatred for his fellow enchanted blade wielder. Samura mentions that, as everyone else is celebrating, that this isn't a major win for the Kamunabi and a major turning point for the protagonist group. If anything, this is just the beginning of the war to come. Previously, back during that fight, Chihiro has basically been holding Hirohiko hostage. He has no arms, and Hirohiko has just been spilling all the information that he has without any hesitation about the Hashaku. They have only 10 members in their group. Their main goal is the Shinuchi, the Magatsumi enchanted blade. They want Yura, their leader of the Hashaku, to wield that blade in its honor. But we start to trail off topic, and it's something that makes me question how deep Rokuhira's blade goes and how dark it actually got. Hirohiko mentions that in school throughout the country, everybody is taught the sword wielders are great people. The Seitei War was a justified war. Whether or not we know it's propaganda or not, Chihiro even mentions that, yeah, that's basically what I was taught too. Everyone around the country is told how great it was that the enchanted blades were not only made, but that the wielders were there to protect us and help us. However, the Shinuchi, the Magatsumi blade, directly contradicts that, because what the hell was the Magatsumi used for? Because the reality bending, god playing, life altering effects of not just it being used on its wielder, but used on the people that it attacks, to the point that Chihiro even admits that it didn't even seem like Hikori's father was in control of himself. Almost like the Magatsumi wielder, despite wherever he was in control somehow from afar, which being the audience, we also know that. All of this is buzzing in Chihiro's mind, and it has been basically holding him hostage in his mental situation lately, but he hasn't had much time to really think about all of it. He has his doubts, sure, but he wants to believe his father at the exact same time. Hirohiko boasts about the Shinuchi. How could you possibly not think that the enchanted blades could be a bad thing? Now, with all of this logic, maybe the enchanted blade wielders aren't heroes. Maybe they shouldn't be protected. And Chihiro picks up what Hirohiko's putting down. He's like, what, is that what you're saying? And Hirohiko says, oh, you know, I don't really have a strong opinion, but, you know, that's what Samura thinks. And Chihiro even admits that he is just, his mind is not really, it's mush at this moment. He just went through an insane battle. He's learned all of this crazy information. Everything is at the heightened of emotions. And it doesn't really click when Hirohiko mentions this. Hirohiko just carries on speaking casually and says that apparently 3 years ago, before Samura went into hiding, he made a contract or a pact with Yura, the leader of the Hoshaku. What that contract may be, we do not know, but confirms something that we've been theorizing for a while, that our trump card, the Hoshaku's trump card, has been a traitor in the swordsman's ranks this whole time, and that traitor is Samura Seichi, the legendary sword wielder that we've been glazing up for so long, that person who we thought could really do no wrong, completely opposed to the beliefs that the sword wielders are MVPs of society and above the innocent lives of the earth. A true Buddhist take, you know, a very equalist, utilitarian perspective. Chihiro can't even comprehend Samura being a traitor or Samura of being on the other side, but here he goes, we don't have time to think about that right now, don't worry about it, let's keep fighting. He picks up his disembodied arm with his teeth, throws it at Chihiro, and by the time Chihiro can even turn around, Kumayori busts through the glass of the theater and shoots right into Hirohiko's mouth. And of course, we know that the enchanted blades are useless if they're already contracted to another person. Aruha is contracted to Kumayori, so the only person that can use Kumayori is Aruha. However, I can't even describe. Hirohiko says Kumayori's name, and its power emerges instantly, conjuring 2 faceless geisha spirits that start swirling around the area as the fight between Hirohiko and Chihiro continues. And it signals to Chihiro and us almost immediately the worst possible fears that we could have ever had, cutting away from Samura after finding out that he made some kind of pact with John Hoshaku, Yura the leader. Aruha died. Somehow, some way, in that short moment that we cut away, whether it was a battle broke out and the tree sorcerer came back, or actually was Samura turning his new awakened blade on everybody else. Who knows what state Hakuri's in to even keep up with this pact and this amazing idea that we had to find all the different enchanted blade wielders and get them out. We still have 2 blade wielders left we don't know who the status of are, let alone now, from what we thought, we at least broke the deadlock and got 1 sword on our side. The Hoshaku didn't just get Kumayori. If we are to believe everything that Hirohiko said, then not only are the Kamunabi down 2 wielders, the Hoshaku are up 2 wielders, because now they have both Tobimune and Kumayori on their side. This whole entire situation couldn't have gone better for them. And it makes me so excited to see what happens in the next coming chapters and the rest of this arc, because this was a very critical chapter to everything. We finally got the confirmation that people have been theorizing for a long time that there was a traitor amongst us. And the worst part is we lose 2 beloved characters. Not only has Samura Seichi, this character that we've loved and grown to think that he was just gonna die because of how cool he was, he's now fallen from grace and is an enemy. And the other guy, Uruha, that we also loved and thought was a pretty cool guy and a badass, is apparently dead. Unless they found some way to transfer an enchanted blade without killing the user, it's pretty clear that for everything that we thought was going good in the cliffhanger last chapter, everything is actually going the worst it possibly could. And all I know is I have no words. I can't even begin to say anything other than Chihiro and Hirohiko is back into play. Whether Hirohiko gets his arms back or not, who knows if Hakuri is also dead, not just Aruha. We're gonna hope that the Mikazumi realize that their master is not on their side anymore and they teleport Hakuri out of there as quick as possible. Maybe we can only hope that the other 2 enchanted blade wielders are willing to not betray us or also not die. One thing that I immediately realized after finishing last week's video was that Samura was the only enchanted blade wielder and quote-unquote outsider to be allowed to not only reunite with Kunishige Rokuhira, but be let into his hideout, know where it is, meet Chihiro of all people. It's honestly kind of disgusting to think that this man that we've really thought was supposed to be this amazing person, and Shiba even trusted enough to be the only person to know where Rokuhira was hiding, is the enchanted blade wielder that would betray us and end up siding with the Hoshaku after everything we've been through. 3 years ago, who else could have possibly released that information besides Samura himself? So last chapter, Hakuri, after making contact contact with Samura was basically able to connect Samura's spirit with Hikori's storage house. We've already seen back in the Rakuzachi arc how by connecting an enchanted blade wielder with the storage house, because the enchanted blade wielder's spirit is essentially the same as the enchanted blade, Hikori is able to teleport the enchanted blade back to that wielder. So Hikori was able to get us Tobimune, which Samura was able to use to decimate all the remaining Datenseki crystal warriors and send the veteran Hishaku tree guy packing. All the threats in Sekutsuji Temple are taken care of and we are in the clear. However, this use of the storehouse when Hikori already wasn't fully healed basically caused Hikori to fall unconscious and pass out. But meanwhile, the last chapter did cut back to Chihiro at the very end, and we noticed that a Hirohiko, who, despite being armless, was somehow able to get Kumayori, the last remaining enchanted blade, fully transported over to him in the theater, and once he makes contact with it, he activates its power. Surprisingly, it seems like Aruha's lifelong contract was broken, and we know what that means. Chihiro is astonished to see Hirohiko wielding Kumayori's power, which seems to be conjuring two giant geishas that who knows what their abilities are. But right as the fight begins, it seems like some of Hikori's storage house bubbles start to pop up. Back at Senkutsuji Temple, right before we do cut away from Samura last chapter, he was starting to speak about something, how this isn't a major turning point for the Kamunabi. This isn't a big victory for them, and actually, the darkness of this new war is just beginning. And when Hikori does actually regain consciousness, he sees all the Mikazumi ninjas have actually just been scattered all across the floor. Their bodies are everywhere. And while at first it is a little bit worrying, Hikori doesn't see any blood, so it seems like they've actually just been knocked unconscious and been hit with the big sleep. Now, we weren't able to see much of Tobimune's power last chapter, although we did see Samura use the little black feathers, very similarly to how Chihiro has used Enten before, by having slashes emerge right from the feathers and just cut a bunch of the Datenseki crystal warriors in half. Knowing that a lot of the enchanted blades have, at the very least, 3 powers, who knows, we haven't seen all of them, so some of them might even have more. It's quite possible that Samura was able to use those black feathers to maybe put his Mikazumi ninjas asleep. Which, honestly, you know what, it makes sense. We've seen the way that Samura feels about the Mikazumi not wanting them to sacrifice themselves and their lives or just wait on Samura's every beck and call. Samura truly doesn't feel that he deserves that, and later on in this chapter we'll actually see a little bit as to why he feels that way. But black feathers are also commonly associated with sleep-inducing powers, and we also see this trait in one of Hokazona's main references, which is Naruto. However, with how dark this betrayal actually ends up being, when it comes to the enchanted blade wielders and how Samura feels about all of them and the beliefs that he's grown to have over the last couple of years, he feels completely justified in killing all of the enchanted blade wielders himself. And when Aruha is just wondering if Samura has gone mad, Samura just starts spitting facts at Aruha and starts letting Aruha know about the different things that have been flowing through Samura's brain for the last 18 years. You know what, Aruha? If getting all of the enchanted blades back in the hands of the Kamunabi, rounding them all up, was really the answer and would usher in a new era of peace, why did we have to hide Rokuhira and all of those blades again after the war? If you really think about it, if it was safe in the Kamunabi's hands, none of that would have had to have happened. And clearly, the truth is, the Enchanted Blade's power isn't safe in anybody's hands. No one should be trusted with absolute power like this, especially themselves, the wielders that were contracted with the blades 18 years ago, because according to Samura, he doesn't elaborate on exactly what this is, but he says that himself and the other 5 blade wielders included are all responsible for hiding some dark, evil truth that happened way back in the Seitei War, to the point that this horrible event he feels has stained their hands with blood that is unwashable, unrepairable. He feels like the fact that not only were a group of people able to get together, do something like this, but also they were able to cover it up, build a country, build idealism, build nationalism, and just build great history, and that all of these heroes did the greatest they could for the country and did the best they could in the Seitei War and did nothing but great deeds. It makes Samura sick. Just the fact that the Kamunabi was willing to twist the story, and as Hirohiko even mentions last chapter, teach it in schools and have everyone feel that Enchanted Blade propaganda. Samura says that for someone that 18 years ago when holding this blade really felt that he fought for justice, he just can't believe that anymore. Which is sad to see because we know that Aruha still believes this to this day. When we first met Aruha, we saw how much of a Rokuhira fanatic he was. We saw how much he loved Chihiro and how much he enjoyed his time as an Enchanted Blade wielder and how he really thought that he was doing the right thing. It's interesting how Aruha, someone that supposedly was complacent in hiding this terrible tragedy, is so much easily able to accept not just the dark sides of what he had to do, but still truly and fully believe that he was in the right and the things that he did were necessary and still are necessary. He still thinks that his life is important. He is sad to see his bodyguards and his elite friends die after all the time he spent with them, but he knows that his life is more important. And unfortunately, Samura does not agree with that. Aruha believes the Hashaku to be nothing but pure evil, the evil that they should be fighting together, not siding with. However, according to Samura, the Hashaku are the lesser of two evils, and a greater evil exists than the Hashaku and what they're capable of. Samura claims that great evil is right in front of them right now. It's him. It's Aruha. It's the other wielders. The Enchanted Blades themselves are the great evil, and that needs to be stopped immediately, and that's what Samura is raising his blade against. These six wielders have caused nothing but death around them. It follows them, and it continues to follow them, to the point that even after they've been labeled as heroes, they're still causing deaths. Just in Senkutsuji Temple alone, the amount of people that were at stake, the innocent monks that were killed, the people that died at the previous temple that Aruha was at, all of these people are dying for what? The good of the country? For six wielders that were able to hide this great sin, being propped up on this pedestal and having people die for them because they think that their lives are important, that is more evil than the Hashaku could ever muster up. And you know what? I can't say that he's wrong, but I think he's just going about this the wrong way. Samura says that he will be the one to slay all of the different Enchanted Blade wielders. That is why he is the one that wanted to have Tobimune and have no other blade wielders get their own blades. And Samura presumably means that after he kills all of the wielders, he's going to take himself out. Samura also believes that, which Aruha promptly brings up and is probably right, that if they get Kumayori or the other blades, the Hashaku are just going to get stronger. But Samura foolishly believes that he's going to be able to handle that himself. Aruha truly thinks that that is a shame, that Samura is that deluded. He doesn't think that the Hashaku are not only that underhanded to pull something out of, left field just at the last second to betray Samura with, but the fact that Samura believes that letting the Hashaku roam free with the Enchanted Blades will actually help his cause, because the amount of evil and chaos that will spread from the Enchanted Blades will change the view of the Enchanted Blades in the people and will tarnish that great history that they have lied themselves into. Etching the Enchanted Blades out of the good graces of history and not reminding people, but showing people what death and destruction the blades were actually made for. No matter if the Hashaku are going to betray Samura or not, Samura claims that for right now, he has to use the Hashaku because it's the only way that he may be able to actually kill the Sword Saint. The Sword Saint being the wielder of the Magatsumi, the Shinuchi, which in the Rakuzachi, we saw how devastating the Shinuchi can really be in battle and how much death and destruction are just brought in its wake. And that was even with the wielder being in captivity away from the sword. So it makes sense that Samura would want help dealing with someone like the Sword Saint. And after they deal with the Sword Saint, whatever happens with the Shinuchi, Samura is willing to take the Hashaku out afterwards. Aruha and Samura, two previous classmates in the Ei sword style, two previous allies in the Seitei War, and two previous wielders of the Enchanted Blade, soldiers of Kunishigi Rokuhire. It's crazy to say that these two characters are squaring up with each other right now, but there's no talking Samura out of his belief. Samura is grounded and believes that he will be keeping people from hell, selfishly claiming no one can ever die by an enchanted blade wielder again, as the two blade wielders charge and slice through each other, with, unfortunately, Hakuri despairing and lamenting on the side, unable to stop any of it, as Iruha falls, his life ending in one final clash of blades. On his way down, Iruha sadly questions his former ally and master if Samura truly believes that he can bear this burden all on his own, and Samura confirms that he will. He has no choice. It is all up to him. Samura truly believes he's doing the right thing. I guess we're gonna find out how much he truly believes that, faced with the child that once looked up to him as a hero. Not because of the enchanted blade, not because of the story that he was fed by national propaganda in the kamunabi, but because he met Samura and saw his greatness in person. Chihiro. Hakuri used the very last of his strength to teleport Chihiro to the scene of the murder, and putting Chihiro face to face in a reunion with his once most idolized master, the legendary blind Traitor, Samura Seichi. Is Chihiro ready to fight a wielder on par with Samura's level yet? Is Samura foolishly putting faith in his own abilities over the deception and underhanded tactics of the Hashaku and Yura? I mean, from what we've seen of the previous enchanted wielders, we've seen them be badasses even without their enchanted blades. So seeing Samura with it, Chihiro might not be able to stand for this, especially after being exhausted and damaged from fighting Hirohiko. It's not looking good. And whether Samura is strong enough to kill the entire Hashaku himself or not, I don't think Yura will give up his treasure that easily. But guys, let me know what you think. What a crazy chapter. I can't believe that Samura is the fucking traitor and that Iruha is dead. Hokazono is cooking right now with Kagurabachi, and I am excited to see where this amazing story goes going forward. The Swordbearer Assassination arc is gonna go down in history as the events that set Kagurabachi's true level of peak storytelling in motion, because this is absolutely the point in the story where things will never go back to the way they were before. The power imbalance between the kamunabi and the Hashaku have shifted for the worse, with the already struggling 3-year deadlock that was already leaning into the Hashaku's favor thanks to the Datenseki crystals now fully outright breaking and putting the Hashaku in a place of strength above the country's government. However, it's pretty clear that despite achieving a decent amount this arc and coming out of the short battle 1 enchanted blade count higher, Yura, the leader of the Hashaku, confirms they really won't be able to be moving as freely as they have been before. So last chapter, it was revealed that Samura's moral sense of justice has made him consider all enchanted blade wielders evil, and he has made direct contact with the Hashaku in order to kill every single one of those wielders left in existence. We get the full conditions of the contract in regards to Samura and the Hashaku, and the stipulations are as follows. In return for Samura vowing to help the Hashaku collect the blades and defeat the kamunabi, Yura will share with Samura 1. All the identities of the 10 Hashaku members, 2. Who was the actual traitor amongst the kamunabi that leaked Rokuhira's location in the first place to the Hashaku so they could murder him 3 years ago, and 3. Reveal where all the enchanted blades are hidden. After the death of Rokuhira Kunishige at the hands of the Hashaku, and finding out their ultimate goal was revealing the ultimate sins of the enchanted blades and the darkness hidden behind their guise of heroism, Samura contacted the Hashaku directly himself, and implying that Rokuhira's death and the fact that there were insiders within the kamunabi that not only allowed it to happen, but potentially made the order in the first place, was the catalyst for Samura's descent into villainhood. Samura plans to take care of everything all in his own hands, and foolishly, he claims that he does not need any help taking down the Hashaku, even after he helps them finish their quote-unquote goal. He kills Iruha without hesitation, and based on Yura, the Hashaku leader's claims, it's to be assumed that now that Samura has Tobi Mune and been unleashed unleashed to the world, they really not only can't move as freely as they used to, but Samura is heavily implied to be a one-man army that was capable of using Tobimune to control the entire battlefield during the Seitei War. And we see what the effects of that actually look like, as we do see a massive owl face in the sky floating above the Hashaku headquarters. Yura claiming that even though he didn't tell Samura where they were hidden and where their location was, Tobimune's powers easily allowed Samura to find and teleport directly to them, meaning at this point there may very well be no place safe in the country from Samura's range now. With Hakuri's final bit of strength, thankfully he was able to forcibly teleport Chihiro away from his just beginning round 2 with Hirohiko and the newly gained Kumayori, just in time for Chihiro to watch Samura deal the final blow to Iruha, his newfound friend. And honestly, I think this is the most broken we've ever seen Chihiro before. Back in the Rakuzachi arc, when meeting John Hashaku, Yura, for a brief moment, we see vengeance consume Chihiro, and he almost loses his mind, focusing solely on killing and getting his revenge than doing anything else. But even in that moment, in the heightened sense of seeing your father's killer for the first time in 3 years, Chihiro was smart enough to at least keep somewhat of a level head and prioritize saving Hakuri and protecting the quote-unquote weak, which I guess you could call Hakuri at the time, but not anymore, which is Chihiro's main belief of what the enchanted blades were created and to be used for in the first place. And he puts that over his revenge against the ones who killed his father. In this moment though, after everything that Chihiro has seen in the Rakuzachi, in Sojo's arc, as well as Hirohiko's tickling and prodding with slight jabs of leaked information, such as Samura possibly being a traitor, and the fact that the propaganda that the enchanted blades are all full of heroism and great deeds might have been wrong after all, and Chihiro might have been lied to his entire life. Something that Chihiro has been really trying not to think about, even though it's been staying in the back of his mind, especially after seeing the Magatsumi firsthand and the kind of chaos that it could cause. If these enchanted blades were really developed to help protect the weak, what in the world does the Shinichi need to be that destructive for? Which Chihiro has clearly reached his mental breaking point with all of these events happening and just building more and more on top of him with really no time to rest or even process all of this information. He's really just starting to not think straight at all, which you're easily able to see through Hokazona's art, which is beautiful. Reality is essentially crumbling for Chihiro. The world that he thought he knew has been pulled out from underneath him like a rug. And mentioned before, people like Sojo's corrupted views on the blades, the Shinichi's incomprehensible power showing cracks, all in the veil that has been placed over Chihiro's head. But now, sitting here watching Iruha, the person that he kind of built a decent relationship with and knew was a good person overall, get killed by his once held role model and idol, Samura Seichi, someone that Chihiro legitimately looked up to as a hero. All of that was just way too much for Chihiro to take in at the moment. Just way too much. And in this quick moment of weakness, Chihiro moves out of blind rage, anger, and most importantly, confusion. And in that moment, Chihiro believes that if Samura is Chihiro's enemy, then god damn it, Chihiro needs to kill him. Chihiro will kill him. That's what he set out to do. That's why he started this journey in the first place. And in this brief moment of sincerity and fragility, Samura slashes down Chihiro and humbles the golden child, handing the boy wonder a loss that honestly was really more mercy than anything, because from this moment on, Chihiro is pronounced dead to society. Not only are the Hashaku not looking for him, but the Kamunabi, who recently declared that they might as well just kill Chihiro if they can after he does their dirty work of protecting the sword bearers, which failed entirely, so what are they going to keep him alive for? So honestly, Chihiro being brought out of the story as quote-unquote pronounced dead is the best thing that could have happened to carry on his legacy, because not for nothing, Samura is even able to trick Yura into believing that Chihiro is dead. And obviously, as the main character, we all know Chihiro's not going to die, and if anything, he's going to come back stronger than ever. If anything is to be pronounced dead, it's this previous version of Chihiro before gaining all of this new information and seeing what the world actually is. In my opinion, I think Chihiro's gonna rise from these ashes as a brand new warrior, with maybe another scar and some new trauma and hate to shape Chihiro and make him stronger. Samura even almost stole Enten during the encounter, but thankfully, Shiba, the man who is always by Chihiro's side, is going to do his best to protect Chihiro, teleporting just in time to save not just Chihiro, but Enten as well from Samura's grubby paws. And apparently, Shiba was absent this whole time because he was busy helping clear out the other enchanted blade wielders and their temples from attack. And thankfully, at least he was able to succeed in saving the other 2 blade wielders, because if we lost everybody, we definitely would have been in hell or high water, showing that Shiba is always most productive off-screen. Meanwhile, Hirohiko is licking his wounds as the male Hashaku member stitches his arms back together. Kumayori has been sealed away for one, that Samura can't steal it back from them and start the fight early with the Hashaku, but 2, Hirohiko needs to learn from everything that happened, learn from his mistakes, and grow. Because not for nothing, even though Samura is working with the Hashaku directly now, after he kills all the enchanted wielders, they're up next for sure. Yura knows this. He understands this. And honestly, he seems more ready for the confrontation than anybody else on the team. Even Hirohiko is directly claiming he's gonna get his revenge on Samura because he thinks he killed Chihiro, which is cute that Hirohiko thinks he needs to protect his quote-unquote friend like that, which is setting up a really cool rivalry between not just Hirohiko and Chihiro, but Hirohiko wanting to kill Samura. Even though, you know, once Hirohiko finds out Chihiro's alive, he'll just be elated with joy. Samura and Yura, either way, proceed to the next phase of their plan, which is hunting down all of the remaining wielders and killing them all, which Yura claims is going to take about a week after all the teleporting and nonsense that Shiba pulled, since he's just great at not leaving behind any tracks, which makes Samura depart, hoping that Yura is correct about that week deadline, because Samura really truly does believe that he wants all of this to be over and that he's doing this for the greater good. By removing the enchanted blades, the Hashaku, and everything left in regards to that dark sin that they all brought about during the Seichi War, Samura believes he's cleansing the world, and he is doing everything he can to stop people from living the same evil, disgusting lives that they had to. And if that means taking care of everything so that by the time Chihiro wakes up, everything is already over by then you know what? Samura may be a traitor-ass bitch, but at least he believes he's doing things for the right reason. He's at least more than willing to play pretend that Chihiro's dead to keep him safe, which resets everything back to zero. Not only is the story completely changed after this, but for all intents and purposes, Chihiro is once again dead to the world and free to move along in the shadows like he did before everything was revealed to the kamunabi. So, with Hakuri alive, and knowing that there was a traitor in the kamunabi that ratted us out, what do we think is coming next in this great story that has just clearly begun? If anything, if this was a video game, this is where I think the title card would play, because goddamn, is Shiba the traitor? That would be too crazy, but who knows? Is Samura going to just start slaughtering the other enchanted blade wielders? What are the Hashaku going to be doing next to play for keeps, and how are they going to get around Samura, especially if he's this powerful? Let me know down in the comments what you guys all think. I am genuinely so excited to see what the next half of Kagurabachi has to offer, because again, this really all felt like just a prologue, and the real story is just beginning. Thank you all so much for watching, and if you haven't already, make sure you hit that like button. It really helps the channel way more than you know. Subscribe if you haven't already to make sure you don't miss any other Kagurabachi videos weekly, or my Sojo video that I just dropped, and subscribe to the main channel if you want to see some other types of main essay video type content. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.